The House Where We Learned to Stay. Volume 2, Growing Together. Winter gradually gives way to spring in the quiet village of Haedam-ri. After successfully finishing his first novel since becoming a father, Seo Minjae begins settling into life as both a parent and a writer. Haneul grows from a crawling baby into an energetic toddler, bringing new challenges, laughter, and worries every single day. As the seasons change, Kang Taewon naturally becomes a constant presence in their lives. What began as a misunderstanding between neighbors slowly transforms into an unspoken partnership built on trust, shared responsibilities, and countless ordinary moments. Neither Minjae nor Taewon notices when helping each other simply becomes part of their daily routine. Chapter 1. A New Morning. The first morning of spring arrived with birdsong. Warm sunlight slipped through the curtains, replacing the pale winter light that had filled the little house only weeks before. Outside, tiny green buds had begun appearing on the trees surrounding Haedam-ri. Inside, someone was already awake. Bah, bah. Tiny hands slapped excitedly against the edge of the crib. Seo Minjae slowly opened one eye. Another cheerful slap. Bah. Minjae couldn't help smiling. I know. He yawned dramatically as he sat up. I've been summoned. The moment he appeared beside the crib, Haneul burst into delighted laughter. Good morning. He gently picked her up. My little alarm clock. Haneul happily rested against his shoulder. Every morning now began like this. Not with an alarm, but with laughter. Breakfast had become livelier. Haneul now insisted on feeding herself. Which meant, half the porridge ended up in her mouth. The other half, on the table, her bib, Minjae's shirt, and somehow, her hair. How? Minjae stared in amazement. You were eating, not painting. Haneul proudly waved her spoon. A blob of porridge landed on Minjae's cheek. She laughed so hard she almost dropped the spoon. Minjae sighed dramatically. I've created a tiny menace. After cleaning both the kitchen and themselves, Minjae opened the windows. Fresh spring air drifted inside. The scent of damp earth and blooming flowers filled the room. He closed his eyes for a moment. When they had first arrived months ago, this house had felt unfamiliar. Now, it smelled like home. 3 familiar knocks echoed from the front door. Knock, knock, knock. Minjae smiled before opening it. Morning. Taewon stood outside carrying a small basket. Fresh strawberries. They're already ripe. A few of them. Minjae accepted the basket with surprise. They look delicious. They're sweeter than last year. Haneul peeked around the corner. The moment she saw Taewon, her face brightened. Da. She reached both arms toward him. Taewon laughed softly. Good morning to you too. Minjae shook his head. I think she's happier to see you than the strawberries. I don't blame her. The strawberries might disagree. They sat on the porch while Haneul carefully examined a strawberry that had already been mashed into tiny pieces for her. She squished it, poked it, then finally tasted it. Her eyes widened. Oh, Minjae smiled. I think she approves. Taewon nodded. That's a relief. I was worried she'd reject my harvest. As Haneul played, Minjae looked toward the hills. The weather's changing. It is. I've been thinking. Taewon waited. I want to start writing another novel. Taewon wasn't surprised. I thought you might. I was afraid I'd burn out after the last one. And, Minjae looked at Haneul. I think living here keeps giving me new stories. Later that morning, after Taewon returned to the orchard, Minjae carried Haneul into the living room. He opened a fresh notebook. Blank pages. A new beginning. What should Papa write this time? Haneul answered by grabbing his pen. No. He laughed. That's mine. She refused to let go. They spent the next 5 minutes in a playful tug of war. Eventually, Minjae surrendered. Fine. You win. He handed her another pen without ink. There. Now we're both writers. Haneul proudly scribbled invisible lines across a scrap of paper. That afternoon, Grandma Bakya visited with homemade rice cakes. My 2 favorite neighbors. Minjae smiled. Come in. Bakya noticed the open notebook on the table. Starting another book already? I think so. She smiled knowingly. You've changed. So everyone keeps telling me. This time, she looked around the cheerful house. I think you'll write while living. Not live only to write. Minjae paused, then quietly nodded. I like that. After lunch, Haneul crawled toward the sofa. Instead of stopping, she grabbed the cushion, pulled herself upward. Her tiny legs trembled. Her hands gripped tightly. Then, she stood. Only for a few seconds. But she stood. Minjae froze. Haneul. She looked proudly at her father. As if waiting. He immediately knelt beside her. You did it. His voice shook with excitement. You stood up. Haneul clapped happily before plopping back onto her bottom. Minjae laughed so hard that tears filled his eyes. I missed your first role. I almost missed this too. He quickly grabbed his phone. Too late. She had already sat down again. He smiled anyway. That's all right. I'll remember it. That evening, Taewon returned to borrow a shovel. Before Minjae could even greet him. You have to see this. Haneul stood today. Taewon's eyes widened. Really? Minjae nodded enthusiastically. For 3 whole seconds. That's impressive. I know. They both looked toward Haneul, who was happily chewing on one of her toys as though she hadn't accomplished anything remarkable. Taewon smiled. She's growing quickly. Minjae's expression softened. Too quickly. As the sun began setting behind the mountains, the 3 of them stood outside watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. A gentle spring breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the village. Minjae held Haneul close. Taewon stood beside them. No one spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. The kind of silence shared between people who no longer needed words to enjoy each other's company. Minjae looked at the blossoms beginning to bloom along the roadside. Winter had ended. A new season had arrived. Just like the flowers quietly opening beneath the warm spring sun. Their little family was growing too. One ordinary morning at a time. Chapter 2. Tiny Steps. Haneul had become obsessed with standing. It started 3 days ago. She would crawl across the living room, find the nearest piece of furniture, grab it with both hands, and pull herself upward. Sometimes she stayed standing for several seconds. Sometimes she immediately fell onto her bottom. And sometimes, she simply stood there and laughed. Seo Minjae had no idea what was so funny. You know you're not supposed to be doing this without telling Papa first, right? Haneul looked at him, then slowly pulled herself upright against the sofa. Minjae sighed. You really don't listen. That morning, Minjae was trying to write. He had managed exactly 2 paragraphs. Then, he looked up. Haneul had pulled herself halfway across the room. Haneul. She looked back. Stay there. She smiled. Don't move. She smiled wider. Minjae narrowed his eyes. That smile means you're about to do something. Haneul immediately let go of the sofa. She wobbled. Minjae shot out of his chair. Haneul. She dropped safely onto her bottom. For 1 second, there was silence. Then she laughed. Minjae pressed a hand against his chest. Papa nearly stopped breathing. Haneul clapped. You're enjoying this. A knock came at the door. Taewon entered carrying a basket of vegetables. He barely had time to remove his shoes before Minjae pointed toward Haneul. She stood by herself. Taewon immediately looked over. Really? For a few seconds. Haneul apparently understood the conversation. She crawled toward Taewon, then grabbed his pants, pulled herself up, and stood. Taewon stared down at her. Again, Minjae crossed his arms. She only performs when she has an audience. Haneul proudly held onto Taewon's leg. Taewon smiled. She's showing off. Exactly. Taewon carefully crouched beside her. Come here. He held out both hands. Haneul stared at him, then at Minjae, then back at Taewon. Minjae immediately understood. No. Taewon looked confused. What? Don't encourage her. Why? Because she's going to start walking. Taewon smiled. Isn't that the goal? Eventually. Haneul reached toward Taewon's hands. Minjae sighed. Fine. Taewon moved backward a short distance. Haneul remained standing while holding the sofa. Come here. She stared at him. Minjae knelt nearby. Come to Papa. Taewon smiled. Or me. Minjae looked at him. Don't make this competitive. I'm not. You sound competitive. I'm encouraging her. You're definitely competitive. Haneul laughed. Then, she let go. Both men froze. Her tiny body wobbled. One foot moved forward. Then the other. One tiny step. Minjae's eyes widened. Haneul. She took another. Then another. 3 tiny steps. Before falling directly into Taewon's waiting arms. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then, she did it. Minjae's voice filled the room. Taewon laughed. Haneul squealed happily in his arms. Minjae immediately reached for his phone. Again. Taewon raised an eyebrow. Again. I need to record it. She might not do it again. I don't care. Minjae was already setting up the camera. I need proof. Haneul did not cooperate. She spent the next 10 minutes crawling instead. Minjae stared at her. You walked 3 steps. She crawled toward a toy. You know how to walk. She grabbed the toy. Why are you crawling? Haneul looked at him, then laughed. Taewon chuckled. Maybe she's tired. Or she's messing with me. Probably both. That afternoon, Minjae rearranged the living room. Anything sharp went higher. Anything fragile disappeared. The coffee table moved. The floor was cleared. Even the decorative basket Taewon had given him months ago was moved to a safer corner. Taewon watched from the doorway. You're baby-proofing again. She's mobile now. She was already mobile. Now she's dangerously mobile. Taewon nodded seriously. That's true. Minjae looked around the room. We need a safer place for her to practice. Taewon pointed toward the empty space beside the window. Put a soft mat there. Maybe some cushions. And move that chair. Minjae nodded. Good idea. Within an hour, the living room had been transformed. A soft play mat covered the floor. Cushions surrounded the edges. Haneul sat in the middle, looking pleased with her new kingdom. Minjae stared at the room. She owns the house now. Taewon smiled. She did before. The following morning, Minjae woke to an unfamiliar sound. Tap, tap, tap. He opened his eyes. What? Tap, tap, tap. He sat up. Haneul's crib was empty. His heart jumped. Haneul. He rushed into the living room. She was there, standing beside the sofa, holding onto the edge, looking extremely proud of herself. Minjae stopped. You. She looked at him, then took one tiny step. And another. Straight toward him. Minjae slowly lowered himself to the floor. Come here. Haneul took another step, then another, and finally collapsed into his arms. Minjae hugged her tightly. His eyes became wet. You walked to Papa. Haneul laughed. He kissed her forehead again and again. You really are growing up. That afternoon, Taewon stopped by. Minjae was waiting at the door. She did it again. Taewon smiled. How many steps? 7. 7. Maybe 8. Taewon laughed. You're counting. Of course. Minjae pulled out his phone. I have a record. Taewon looked at the screen. There were several short videos. Haneul standing. Haneul wobbling. Haneul falling. Haneul laughing. Haneul crawling away. Taewon looked impressed. You recorded everything. I don't want to forget. His voice became softer. These moments happen once. Taewon nodded. I understand. That evening, Minjae sat on the floor while Haneul practiced walking between them. 1 step. 2. 3. Sometimes she fell. Sometimes she made it. Every time she fell, one of them helped her back up. No frustration. No pressure. Just encouragement. Again. You can do it. Take your time. Haneul looked from one man to the other. Then smiled. And tried again. By bedtime, Haneul was exhausted. Minjae placed her carefully in her crib. She immediately fell asleep. He stood there for a while. Taewon quietly joined him at the doorway. She'll be running soon. Minjae sighed. Don't say that. Taewon laughed softly. You'll have to chase her. I know. Minjae smiled. But, he looked at his sleeping daughter. I'm looking forward to it. Later that night, Minjae opened his journal. He wrote. Today, Haneul took her first steps. He paused. Then added. I thought I would be afraid of watching her grow up. He looked toward the bedroom. I am. Another pause. But I'm also excited. He smiled. Maybe being a parent means learning to let go a little at a time. He closed the journal. Outside, the spring wind moved softly through the trees. Inside, Haneul slept peacefully. And tomorrow, there would be more steps. More falls. More laughter. More moments Minjae would wish he could keep forever. For now, though, he was simply grateful to be there for every one of them. Chapter 3. The Children's Picnic. Saturday morning arrived with an unusual amount of noise. Laughter echoed through Haedam-ri. Children ran along the village road. Parents carried baskets. Grandparents brought folding chairs, blankets, and enough food to feed twice the village. Seo Minjae stood at his front door with Haneul in his arms, watching the commotion. What happened? Taewon, standing beside him, pointed toward the community field. The spring family picnic. Minjae blinked. Today. Taewon nodded. You forgot. I've been writing. That explains it. Minjae looked down at Haneul. She was wearing a little yellow cardigan and staring at the children running down the road. Her eyes followed them with growing curiosity. Do you want to go? Haneul immediately reached toward the children. Minjae laughed. I'll take that as a yes. The community field had been transformed. Large picnic blankets covered the grass. Tables were filled with homemade food. A few simple decorations hung between the trees. Children played games while adults talked nearby. Minjae stopped at the edge of the field. Suddenly, he felt awkward. Everyone seemed to know everyone. They greeted each other naturally. They shared food. They laughed about old stories. Minjae had lived in Haedam-ri for months. Yet part of him still felt like a visitor. Taewon noticed. You alright? Yeah. Minjae smiled. I'm just. He looked around. Not used to this. Taewon. Understood. You don't have to do anything. Just stay. Minjae looked at him. That's your advice. Usually. Minjae smiled. It's surprisingly useful. Bakya spotted them almost immediately. There you are. She waved enthusiastically. Come sit with us. Minjae followed. A few neighbors greeted him. Someone immediately handed him a plate of food. Someone else asked about his novel. Another person complimented Haneul's cardigan. Minjae barely had time to respond. Then an elderly woman squeezed his arm. You've become part of the village. Minjae blinked. I have. She looked offended. Of course. Then she walked away before he could answer. Taewon quietly laughed. Congratulations. What? You're officially trapped. Haneul sat on a blanket surrounded by toys. She watched the older children play nearby. One little boy rolled a colorful ball toward her. Haneul stared at it, then crawled after it. The boy laughed. She likes it. Minjae smiled. She's very curious. The boy rolled the ball again. Haneul chased it. Soon, several children gathered around her. She's cute. What's her name? Haneul. One girl crouched down. Haneul, can you walk? Haneul proudly pulled herself up using the girl's knee. Everyone gasped. She can stand. Minjae immediately covered his face. Oh, no. Taewon laughed beside him. She's showing off again. The children cheered when Haneul took 2 tiny steps. She immediately fell onto the blanket. Then laughed. The children applauded. Haneul clapped along with them. Minjae couldn't stop smiling. She loves attention. Taewon nodded. She gets that from someone. Minjae looked at him. Who? Taewon pointed at him. Me. You. I don't. Minjae paused. Then remembered how loudly he'd celebrated Haneul's first steps. Maybe a little. After lunch, the village children organized a simple relay game. The adults watched from their blankets. Minjae sat beside Taewon while Haneul played safely nearby. For a while, he simply watched. The scene felt strangely familiar. Warm, peaceful, normal. He had once imagined that moving to the countryside would mean living quietly. He hadn't expected quiet to come with this much noise. Children laughing, neighbors calling to each other. Someone arguing over whose turn it was. Bakya shouting that everyone needed to eat more. Minjae laughed under his breath. This isn't very peaceful. Taewon glanced at him. No, but you look happy. Minjae smiled. I am. A little later, one of the mothers approached Minjae. Can I ask you something? Of course. She hesitated. How did you manage when Haneul was a newborn? Minjae blinked. I didn't. She laughed. No, I survived. That's different. Minjae smiled. Honestly. He looked at Haneul. I was terrified. I didn't know what I was doing. I made mistakes. I still do. The woman smiled. I think everyone does. Minjae nodded. Probably. She glanced toward Taewon. And you weren't alone. Minjae followed her gaze. Taewon was helping 2 children fix a kite. He looked completely at ease. Minjae smiled. No, I wasn't. Later in the afternoon, the children started flying kites. One kite rose beautifully into the sky. Another immediately crashed into a tree. The third got tangled around someone's hat. Everyone burst out laughing. Then, a sudden gust of wind sent one of the kites flying toward the edge of the field. Taewon ran after it. Minjae laughed. Why are you running? Because you gave it to me. I thought you knew how to fly one. I know how. Then why is it in a tree? Wind. That's not an answer. The 2 men ended up trying to untangle the kite together. The children watched eagerly. Taewon pulled one string. Minjae pulled another. Wait. Which one? That one. This one. No, the other one. Which other one? Your other left. My other left. Minjae burst out laughing. What does that even mean? Taewon stared at him. I don't know. They both laughed. Eventually, they freed the kite. The children cheered. As the sun began to lower, everyone gathered for a final group photograph. Minjae stood at the back holding Haneul. Taewon stood beside him. Someone shouted, "Move closer." Minjae looked confused. We're close enough. Closer. Taewon stepped slightly nearer. Their shoulders touched. Minjae noticed. For some reason, he didn't move away. The photographer raised the camera. Smile. Haneul suddenly grabbed Minjae's nose. Click. The entire village laughed. After the photograph, everyone began packing up. Minjae helped fold blankets. Taewon carried the heavier baskets. Bakya packed leftover food into containers. Haneul had fallen asleep in Minjae's arms. He looked down at her peaceful face. She had fun. Taewon nodded. So did you. Minjae smiled. Maybe. You laughed a lot. Did I? Several times. Minjae thought about it. He had. More than he realized. The walk home was quiet. The evening sun cast long shadows over the village road. Minjae carried sleeping Haneul. Taewon walked beside him. After a while, Minjae spoke. I used to think moving here meant disappearing. Taewon looked at him. Disappearing. From Seoul. From my old life. I thought I needed to get away from everyone. He looked at the village houses glowing warmly in the evening. But today, he smiled. I realized I don't want to disappear anymore. Taewon said nothing. He simply walked beside him. At the gate of Minjae's house, Taewon stopped. Good night. Good night. Minjae adjusted Haneul in his arms. Then paused. Taewon. Thank you. For what? For bringing us. Taewon smiled. You were the one who came. Minjae shook his head. Still, he looked toward the village. I think Haneul needed this. Then quietly added. Maybe I did too. Taewon smiled. Then we'll come again next year. Minjae laughed. You're assuming we'll still be here. Taewon looked at him. I am. Something about the certainty in his voice made Minjae smile. I guess we will. That night, Minjae placed the village photograph beside the family portrait from the winter. He looked at both for a long time. One showed the three of them. The other showed the whole village. Together, they reminded him of how much had changed. He had come to Haedam-ri believing he only needed a quiet place to raise his daughter. But slowly, the quiet place had become a community. The neighbor had become a friend. And the house that once felt temporary had begun feeling permanent. Minjae turned off the light. From the bedroom came Haneul's soft breathing. He smiled. Good night, little one. Outside, the village settled into peaceful silence. And for the first time, Minjae didn't feel like an outsider watching everyone else's lives. He was part of this one. Chapter 4. A long night. The rain began just before sunset. By evening, the warm spring air had turned cool, and the windows of Minjae's house were covered with tiny droplets. Seo Minjae didn't mind the rain. Usually, he found it comforting. The sound helped him write. Tonight, however, he couldn't concentrate. Haneul had been unusually quiet. She had barely touched her dinner. And when Minjae picked her up after her bath, she felt warmer than usual. He pressed his cheek gently against her forehead. You're warm. Haneul gave a small, tired whimper. Minjae's expression immediately changed. Okay. He carried her to the sofa. Papa's here. He checked her temperature carefully. It was elevated, but not dangerously high. Still, Minjae's heart began beating faster. The last time Haneul had been sick, she had been much younger. He remembered the fear, the hospital, the long hours sitting beside her, the terrible feeling of not knowing what to do. His hands tightened around the thermometer. No. He took a slow breath. Don't panic. Haneul looked up at him with sleepy eyes. Minjae immediately softened. Papa's not going to panic. He smiled for her, even though he was still worried. He called the pediatric clinic. The doctor listened to his description and reassured him that Haneul's symptoms sounded like a mild cold, but told him what warning signs to watch for and when to seek further care. Minjae listened carefully. He wrote everything down. Twice. Then he looked at Haneul. She was already half asleep against his chest. All right, he whispered. We'll take care of you. A knock came at the door. 3 familiar knocks. Minjae didn't even have to ask. Taewon. He opened the door. Taewon stood there holding an umbrella. I saw the lights. He stopped when he noticed Haneul. She's sick. Just a cold. Minjae tried to sound calm. Taewon nodded. How's she doing? She's tired. Did you call the clinic? Yes. Good. Taewon stepped inside. He didn't ask for permission to help. He simply took off his wet jacket. What do you need? Minjae looked at him. I don't know. It was the first honest answer he could give. Taewon went into the kitchen. You haven't eaten. Minjae blinked. I'm not hungry. That's not what I asked. I'm fine. Taewon looked at him. You said the same thing when you were sick last winter. Minjae stared. You remember that? I remember everything. Something about the answer made Minjae pause. Taewon opened the refrigerator. I'll make something simple. You don't have to. I know. The kitchen soon filled with the quiet sounds of cooking. Minjae remained on the sofa with Haneul. Every few minutes, he checked her. Taewon noticed. You can breathe. Minjae sighed. I am breathing. You're holding your breath every time she moves. Am I? Yes. Minjae looked down. Haneul shifted against his chest. He immediately froze. Taewon smiled. See. Minjae laughed quietly. Maybe you're right. A simple bowl of rice porridge appeared on the table. Taewon placed it in front of Minjae. Eat. Minjae stared at it. You sound like Grandma Bakya. That's because she's right. Minjae took a small bite. Then another. After a few minutes, the bowl was empty. Taewon nodded in satisfaction. Better. You really are bossy. You need someone to be. Minjae looked at him, then smiled. Maybe. The rain continued. Haneul's temperature slowly began coming down. She was still tired, but she was resting comfortably. Minjae carried her to her room. Taewon followed and helped adjust the curtains and prepare the room comfortably. When everything was settled, the two men stood quietly beside the crib. Haneul slept peacefully. Minjae whispered, she looks so small when she's asleep. Taewon smiled. She won't for long. I know. Minjae sighed. She keeps growing. Around midnight, Haneul woke. A small cry came from the bedroom. Minjae was awake immediately. I'm here. He picked her up. She whimpered and buried her face against his shoulder. It's okay. Papa's here. Taewon appeared at the doorway. She needs you. Minjae nodded. He walked slowly around the room, gently rocking Haneul. The rain tapped against the window. The clock moved past midnight. Then 1, then 2. Neither man seemed to notice. At 3 in the morning, Haneul finally settled. Minjae sat on the sofa with her asleep against his chest. His eyes were heavy. His hair was a mess. His shirt had a small patch of drool on it. Taewon sat across from him. You should sleep. I'll sleep when she's completely comfortable. She's comfortable. I know. But, Minjae looked down at Haneul. I'm still scared. Taewon didn't tell him not to be. Instead, he quietly said. That's okay. Minjae looked up. You don't have to stop being afraid. You just don't have to be afraid alone. Minjae became very still. Those words reached somewhere deep inside him. He looked at Haneul, then at Taewon. Thank you. Taewon smiled. You don't have to thank me every time. I know, but I want to. Taewon nodded. Then you're welcome. A little before dawn, Haneul finally smiled in her sleep. Minjae noticed immediately. Look. Taewon leaned closer. She's smiling. Minjae's tired expression brightened. She's feeling better. He gently touched her cheek. Good. The relief in his voice was unmistakable. Morning slowly arrived. The rain stopped. Pale sunlight entered through the curtains. Haneul woke hungry. She drank her bottle normally. Then, to Minjae's enormous relief, she reached for her stuffed rabbit. Rabbit. Haneul hugged it. Minjae laughed. That's a good sign. Taewon stood near the kitchen doorway. Definitely. After breakfast, Minjae finally allowed himself to relax. He sank onto the sofa. Haneul sat beside him, looking much more energetic than she had the night before. Then she crawled toward Taewon. Taewon opened his arms. She happily climbed into them. Minjae watched them, his chest filled with warmth. The night had been long, exhausting, scary, but they had gotten through it. Together. Taewon prepared to leave once Haneul was settled. At the door, Minjae stopped him. You didn't sleep. I'm all right. Minjae smiled. You sound like me. Exactly. They both laughed. Then Minjae became serious. Really? Thank you for staying. Taewon looked at him. You would have stayed too. I would. I know. Taewon stepped outside. Before closing the door, Minjae looked at him. Taewon. If Haneul gets sick again. He hesitated. Then smiled. Can I call you? Taewon's expression softened. Anytime. The door closed gently. Minjae leaned against it for a moment. He had spent months learning how to ask for help. Last night, he had finally understood something important. Asking someone to stay wasn't weakness. Sometimes, it was trust. He walked back to Haneul, who was happily playing with her stuffed rabbit. Come here. He picked her up. She immediately rested her head against his shoulder. Outside, sunlight returned to Haedam-ri. And inside their little house, after one long night, father and daughter held each other a little tighter. Chapter 5. The Little Library. The village library was smaller than Minjae expected. It occupied the first floor of an old community building, tucked between the post office and a little stationery shop. There were only 3 shelves along the walls. A handful of children's books sat on a low wooden shelf near the window. And in the corner stood an old reading chair that looked as though it had been there for decades. Haneul immediately loved it. She crawled straight toward the children's section. Haneul. Minjae hurried after her. Wait for Papa. She stopped, looked back, then continued crawling. I suppose that means no. The invitation had come from the village librarian, Mrs. Han. She had read Minjae's latest novel and discovered that he was a children's storyteller as well. We're starting a little reading afternoon for the children, she had explained. Would you read something for us? Minjae had almost refused. He wasn't used to reading his stories aloud. Writing was private. Speaking in front of people was different. But when he mentioned it to Taewon, the answer had been immediate. You should do it. Minjae had stared at him. That's all. Yes. You're not going to give me some complicated advice. No. Why? Taewon had smiled. Because you already know how to tell stories. Now Minjae sat in the reading chair with Haneul on his lap. Several village children sat on the floor in front of him. Taewon stood at the back of the room. He had come to help move some chairs. At least, that was what he claimed. Minjae suspected he simply wanted to watch. He opened the book. Once upon a time. The children immediately became quiet. Haneul looked up at her father. Minjae smiled. There was a little rabbit who believed the moon followed him everywhere. His voice changed as he read. Soft during quiet parts. Louder during exciting ones. He made funny voices for the characters. The children laughed. Even the shyest little boy in the back began smiling. Haneul stared at her father with complete fascination. She didn't understand the story yet. But she understood his voice. She clapped whenever the other children laughed. Minjae couldn't help laughing too. When the story ended, the children applauded. One little girl immediately raised her hand. Mr. Seo. Minjae smiled. Yes. Did you really write that? I did. All by yourself. Mostly. She pointed toward Haneul. Does she help? The room went quiet. Minjae looked at his daughter. Haneul was chewing on the corner of a soft cloth book. He laughed. Very much. How? She gives me lots of deadlines. The children laughed. She also destroys my notes. More laughter. Minjae sighed dramatically. She's a difficult editor. After the reading session, the children gathered around Haneul. Can she walk now? Yes. Can she talk? A little. What does she say? Minjae thought. Mostly things I don't understand. Haneul babbled loudly. One of the children nodded seriously. She said hello. Minjae smiled. You're probably better at understanding her than I am. Taewon approached carrying a stack of returned books. You were good. Minjae looked at him. Good. Very good. Minjae smiled. You sound surprised. I wasn't. Then why did you say it like that? Taewon thought for a moment. Because I wanted you to know. Minjae's smile softened. Thank you, Mrs. Han approached them. The children loved it. I'm glad. I'd like to make this a regular program. Minjae blinked. Regular. Once or twice a month. She looked at him hopefully. Would you consider coming back? Minjae glanced toward Haneul, then at the children still looking through picture books. Finally, he smiled. I'd like that. On the way home, Minjae carried Haneul while Taewon walked beside him. The afternoon sun warmed the village road. You really enjoyed that. Taewon said it casually. Minjae nodded. I did. You looked different. Different. Relaxed. Minjae thought about it. I guess I forgot I could enjoy telling stories. You write stories every day. That's different. How? Minjae smiled. When I write, I'm alone. He looked back toward the library. Today, I got to see people's faces. He paused. That's nice. Haneul suddenly reached toward Taewon. Taewon raised an eyebrow. Me. She reached again. Minjae laughed. Apparently. Taewon carefully took her. Haneul immediately rested against him. You've become her favorite person. I don't think so. You should see your face. What face? That one. Taewon smiled. Minjae laughed. When they reached the house, Minjae noticed something tucked inside his bag. A small piece of paper. He opened it. It was from the little girl who had asked whether Haneul helped with his writing. Written in uneven handwriting were the words, "Thank you for the story, Mr. Seo." Below it was a drawing. 3 stick figures. One tall, one slightly shorter, and one tiny figure in the middle. Minjae stared at it. Taewon looked over his shoulder. What's that? A gift. He smiled. It's terrible. Taewon looked at the drawing. It's good. You can barely tell what it is. I can. Taewon pointed. That's Haneul. How do you know? She's the smallest. Minjae laughed. And these? Taewon looked at the 2 larger figures. He paused. Us. Minjae looked at the drawing again. The child had drawn the 3 figures holding hands. He smiled. Apparently. That evening, Minjae placed the drawing beside his laptop. He opened his manuscript. The cursor blinked. For once, he didn't feel pressure to write something important. He simply began. A sentence. Then another. The story flowed naturally. Not because he was chasing a deadline. Not because he was afraid of disappointing his publisher. But because he had remembered why he loved stories in the first place. Stories connected people. They made strangers laugh together. They gave children new worlds. They gave adults somewhere to rest for a little while. And sometimes, they reminded someone that they weren't alone. Haneul crawled beneath the table. Minjae looked down. Are you helping? She looked up, then proudly raised the piece of paper. No. Minjae laughed. That's not your drawing. She crawled away with it anyway. Hey. Taewon appeared in the doorway. What happened? She stole my library gift. Taewon looked at Haneul, then at Minjae. Maybe she likes it. That's not the point. What's the point? She keeps stealing everything. Taewon smiled. Then you should write about it. Minjae paused, then smiled. Maybe I will. That night, before going to sleep, Minjae placed the child's drawing beside the family portrait. The drawing was crooked. The colors went outside the lines. The 3 figures had strange hairstyles. But Minjae loved it. He looked at the little figures holding hands. Then toward Haneul's room. Then toward the neighboring house. A small library. A simple story. A child's drawing. None of them seemed important on their own. But somehow, they were becoming part of his life. Part of the story he was living. And for the first time, Minjae realized that perhaps being a novelist wasn't only about creating stories. Sometimes, it was about noticing the stories already happening around you. Chapter 6. A letter from Seoul. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Seo Minjae was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to eat breakfast with one hand while stopping Haneul from stealing his spoon with the other. Haneul. She giggled. That's Papa's. She reached for it again. You have your own. She ignored him. Minjae sighed. You're very persistent. A knock sounded at the door. He looked toward it. Who could that be? Haneul immediately crawled toward the entrance. No, no. Stay here. She stopped, then turned around, and crawled faster. You really don't listen. The village postman stood outside holding a thick envelope. Seo Minjae. Yes. Registered mail. Minjae signed for it. The envelope carried the logo of his publisher. He stared at it. Haneul reached for it. No. He lifted it higher. This isn't for you. She looked offended. After breakfast, Minjae finally opened the envelope. Inside was an invitation. His publisher was organizing a literary event in Seoul to celebrate several newly released authors. His latest novel had been selected as one of the featured works. There would be a small author talk, a reading, an interview, and a signing session. Minjae read the letter twice. Then a third time. Seoul. He leaned back. He hadn't been there since the editorial meeting months ago. The thought of returning didn't frighten him. Not exactly. But it brought back memories of the life he had left behind. The apartment, the publishing office, the crowded streets, the constant deadlines, the version of himself who had believed work was the only thing that mattered. He looked toward Haneul. She was happily stacking wooden blocks. Then knocking them over. You're lucky. She knocked them over again. Very lucky. That afternoon, Taewon came by with a basket of vegetables. Minjae was still holding the invitation. You've been staring at that for 10 minutes. Taewon placed the basket on the counter. What is it? An invitation. From Seoul. Minjae looked surprised. How did you know? The envelope. Right. He handed it over. Taewon read it. This is important. I know. You should go. Minjae sighed. I knew you'd say that. Why? Because you always say that. When it's true. Minjae sat down. They want me there for 2 days. Taewon looked at him. 2. Maybe 3. That's longer than last time. I know. Minjae rubbed his forehead. And Haneul. Taewon waited. I don't want to leave her again. You don't have to decide immediately. I know. Minjae looked at the invitation. But this is a big opportunity. It is. My publisher wants me to speak about the book. That's good. They said there might be foreign publishers there too. Taewon smiled. That's very good. Minjae groaned. You're making this worse. How? You're agreeing with everything. Taewon laughed. You asked for my opinion. I did. Then I'm giving it. That evening, Minjae called editor Kang. I received the invitation. Good. You really want me to go? Of course. I'll have Haneul with me. Bring her if you can. Minjae blinked. Really? You're a father, Minjae. I don't expect you to pretend otherwise just because you're attending a literary event. His editor's voice softened. People know your story now. The novel became successful because it was honest. Don't hide the life that gave you the story. Minjae was quiet. I understand. After the call, Minjae sat beside Haneul. She was playing with a picture book. He gently turned a page for her. Papa might have to go to Seoul. Haneul looked at him. We might take the train. She slapped the page. Is that a yes? Another slap. I'll take that as excitement. The following day, Minjae started preparing. This time, he didn't panic. He made a list. Clothes, baby supplies, food, diapers, toys, medicine cabinet essentials, documents, and a notebook. He looked at the list. Then added, emergency snacks. Taewon looked over his shoulder. You have 12 things written under snacks. Those are essential. For whom? Haneul. You don't eat snacks. Minjae stared at him. I am also Haneul's father. Taewon laughed. Preparations became a village-wide operation. Bakya brought extra baby clothes. The village shopkeeper offered travel-sized supplies. Mrs. Han from the library gave Haneul a small picture book for the journey. Even the postman stopped by to wish them luck. Minjae stared at the growing pile of things. We're going to Seoul for 2 days. Bakya nodded. Yes. Why does it look like we're moving? Taewon quietly answered. Because you packed like you are. Minjae pointed at him. Don't encourage them. That night, Minjae sat on the porch. The invitation rested beside him. Taewon sat nearby. For a while, they listened to the crickets. I used to go to Seoul all the time. Minjae said quietly. I never noticed how loud it was. Taewon glanced at him. And now I notice. He looked toward the village. It's strange. What is? I used to dream about getting away from Seoul. And now? Minjae smiled. Now I'm going back. Taewon nodded. But you'll come back here. It wasn't a question. Minjae looked at him. Of course. The certainty in Taewon's voice made Minjae smile. He looked down at the invitation again. I'm nervous. About the event. A little. About Seoul. Maybe. He hesitated. Mostly. He looked toward the house. I'm worried about taking Haneul somewhere crowded. Taewon understood immediately. You'll prepare. I know. And if something goes wrong. Minjae looked at him. We'll handle it. Taewon smiled. Exactly. A few days later, the train tickets arrived. Minjae held them carefully. 2 adults. 1 infant. Seoul. He looked at Haneul. Then at Taewon. You know. Taewon raised an eyebrow. What? This feels different from the last trip. How? Last time, I left Haneul here. Minjae smiled. This time, he lifted the tickets. She gets to come with me. Taewon nodded. And I'll be there too. Minjae looked at him. For some reason, that sentence made the trip feel much less frightening. Right. That night, Minjae placed the invitation and train tickets inside his desk drawer. Then he opened his journal. He wrote, I'm going back to Seoul. He paused. Then added, not because I'm running away from this place. Another line, because I finally have somewhere to return to. He closed the journal. From the next room came Haneul's sleepy babbling. Minjae smiled. The city might be waiting for him. His publisher might be waiting. His readers might be waiting. But for the first time in his life, he knew exactly where he wanted to return afterward. Haedam-ri, his little house, his daughter, and the people who had quietly become part of his home. Chapter 7. The Promise. The old playground sat at the far end of the village. It wasn't much anymore. One swing hung from a rusty chain. The wooden slide had faded from years of sunlight and rain. The small climbing frame leaned slightly to one side. Most of the village children had stopped playing there. But Haneul had recently discovered it. And she loved it. Unfortunately, she couldn't actually play on it yet. She mostly sat on Minjae's lap while staring at everything. Still, that was enough. Do you like it? Minjae held her securely. Haneul reached toward the swing. That's a swing. She made an excited sound. Yes, Papa knows what that is. Taewon arrived carrying a toolbox. Minjae looked at him. You're fixing it. Taewon nodded. The village chief asked me. Minjae looked at the playground again. It's pretty old. Very. Can it be repaired? Most of it. Haneul suddenly leaned forward. Taewon caught her little hand before she could grab a rusty piece of metal. Not that. Minjae laughed. She has excellent taste. Apparently. By the following Saturday, several villagers had gathered. The plan was simple. Repair the playground before the summer children's activities began. Taewon handled the damaged wooden boards. Several parents cleaned and repainted the equipment. Bakya arrived with enough food to feed everyone. And Minjae was assigned to sanding. He stared at the piece of wood in front of him. How do I do this? Taewon looked over. Like that. That's not an explanation. Move the sandpaper. Which direction? Back and forth. Minjae frowned. I knew you were going to say that. Haneul sat safely on a blanket nearby, surrounded by toys. Every few minutes, she crawled toward the workers. Every few minutes, someone had to redirect her. Eventually, she crawled toward Minjae. Papa. Minjae looked down. Did you come to supervise? She grabbed his pant leg. I see. He looked at Taewon. She's checking our progress. Taewon nodded seriously. We should work harder. The morning passed quickly. The old swing was replaced. The loose boards were removed. The climbing frame was straightened. The ground was cleared of stones. Little by little, the playground began looking new again. Minjae stepped back. Wow. Taewon wiped his forehead. Not bad. It's completely different. It just needed some care. Minjae looked at the old wood piled nearby. Sometimes, things aren't broken. They just need someone to take care of them. Taewon looked at him. Sometimes. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither said anything. Then Haneul squealed from the blanket. The moment disappeared. Minjae laughed. Apparently we're needed. At lunch, everyone sat beneath a large tree. Bakya handed Minjae a bowl. Eat. Thank you. Taewon sat beside him. Haneul was between them, happily eating mashed vegetables. A village father looked toward the playground. Children will love it. Another nodded. It's been years since we repaired it. Minjae smiled. It's nice. The man looked at him. You helped too. I barely did anything. You came. Minjae laughed. That's enough. In a village. The man smiled. Sometimes. After lunch, the children returned. They stared at the newly repaired playground. One little boy ran toward the swings. Can we play? The adults laughed. Carefully. The children immediately scattered. Their laughter filled the field. Haneul watched them from Minjae's arms. She bounced excitedly. You want to join them? She reached toward the playground. Not yet. Minjae smiled. You're still too small. Taewon approached. Next year. Minjae looked at him. Next year. She'll be running by then. Minjae sighed. Don't remind me. Later that afternoon, Taewon was checking the final bolts when Minjae approached. You really do this all the time. What? Fix things. Taewon shrugged. Someone has to. Do you ever get tired? Sometimes. Then why keep doing it? Taewon looked toward the children playing. Because I know what it's like when something important isn't taken care of. Minjae was quiet. Taewon continued working. Things matter because people use them. Places matter because people make memories there. Minjae smiled. That's a very novelist answer. Taewon glanced at him. Maybe I've been listening to you too much. The sun began to set. Most of the villagers had already gone home. Only Minjae and Taewon remained, cleaning up the tools. Haneul was asleep in her stroller. Minjae picked up a small wooden board. Taewon. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why do you help me so much? Taewon stopped. The question had caught him off guard. Minjae continued. You help with Haneul. You help with the house. You help with the orchard. You even helped me prepare for Seoul. He smiled faintly. I've probably thanked you 100 times. Maybe more. Taewon smiled. Probably. But, Minjae looked at him. Why? Taewon was quiet for a moment. Then he looked toward the sleeping baby. Because I want to. Minjae blinked. That's it. That's it. But, Taewon shook his head. You don't have to earn help. You don't owe me anything. Minjae's expression softened. Taewon continued. When you first came here, you looked like you were trying to carry everything yourself. You still do sometimes. Minjae laughed quietly. I know. But you're getting better. Taewon smiled. That's enough for me. Minjae lowered his gaze. I'll remember that. Taewon nodded. Then Minjae smiled. Still, if you keep helping us. He hesitated. You should know that Haneul and I are probably going to get used to having you around. Taewon looked at him. I already have. Minjae's heart skipped unexpectedly. He looked away. Oh. For once, he didn't know what else to say. They finished cleaning. Before leaving, Minjae looked back at the playground. The swings moved gently in the evening breeze. The repaired slide reflected the last sunlight. Children's laughter had faded into the distance. It looks good. Taewon stood beside him. It does. Minjae smiled. Let's bring Haneul here when she's bigger. We will. And let her use the swing. Of course. Minjae looked at him. You promise? Taewon nodded. I promise. They walked home together. Haneul slept peacefully in her stroller. At the gate, Minjae stopped. Taewon. Thank you. Taewon smiled. You already said that. I know. I'll accept it again. Minjae laughed. Good. He looked down at Haneul. Then back at Taewon. Next year. Next year. That night, Minjae wrote in his journal. Today we repaired the village playground. He paused. Then added. Haneul is too young to remember it. Another line. But someday she'll play there. He smiled. Then wrote. And when she does, I'll tell her that we built it together. He closed the journal. Outside, the night breeze moved through the trees. The playground stood quietly beneath the moonlight. Waiting. For small footsteps. For children's laughter. For memories that had not happened yet. And for a promise made between two people who were slowly becoming something more important to each other than either of them had expected. Chapter 8. Haneul's first word. The morning began unusually quietly. Seo Minjae sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, one hand resting on the keyboard. Across from him, Haneul sat in her high chair. She was supposed to be eating breakfast. Instead, she was staring very seriously at a piece of banana. Minjae glanced at her. You've been looking at that for a while. Haneul poked it, then squished it, then looked at him. Are you waiting for it to do something? She giggled. Minjae smiled. You're strange. He returned to his laptop. 3 seconds later, a tiny hand slapped the tray. Smack. Minjae looked up. Haneul. She smiled innocently. Food. Another smack. I know. Food. She smacked the tray again. Minjae sighed. Okay. Message received. After breakfast, Minjae cleaned Haneul's hands and face. She immediately crawled toward the front door. Where are you going? Haneul turned around. Outside. She smiled. Minjae understood. Fine. He picked her up. We'll go outside. The moment they stepped onto the porch, Haneul became excited. Spring had fully arrived. Flowers had begun blooming along the garden. Birds hopped between the branches. The orchard beyond the fence was filled with new leaves. Minjae carried her toward the garden. Look. He pointed toward the flowers. Pretty, right? Haneul reached toward them. Careful. He moved her hand away. You can't pull them. She looked offended. Flowers are for looking. She stared at him. Minjae smiled. At least for now. A familiar voice came from beyond the fence. Good morning. Taewon was carrying a basket of freshly picked vegetables. Haneul immediately turned. Her face brightened. She stretched both arms toward him. Taewon smiled. Good morning. Minjae laughed. Someone was waiting for you. Taewon stepped closer. Haneul bounced excitedly in Minjae's arms. Then she made a sound. Ta. Both men froze. Minjae looked at her. What was that? Haneul stared at Taewon. Ta. Taewon's eyes widened slightly. Minjae's mouth fell open. Did you just? Haneul smiled. Taewon looked at Minjae. Minjae looked at Taewon. Neither spoke. Then Haneul laughed. Minjae immediately crouched down in front of her. Haneul. She looked at him. Say it again. Minjae stared. Taewon covered his mouth, trying not to laugh. She said it. I heard. Minjae pointed at himself. Papa. Haneul looked at him. Minjae waited. His entire expression changed. What? Haneul blinked. Minjae's eyes widened. She said Papa. Taewon laughed softly. Congratulations. Minjae turned toward him. She said it. I heard. She actually said it. I know. Minjae scooped Haneul into his arms. You said Papa. Haneul giggled. Minjae kissed her cheeks repeatedly. Again. He laughed. Again. Again. Minjae's eyes became wet. He stopped for a moment. Then hugged her carefully. You said your first word. Taewon watched quietly. His smile softened. Minjae looked at him. Did you hear it? Of course. You were here. I was. Minjae laughed through the tears in his eyes. I'm glad. Taewon nodded. Me too. The news spread through the village before lunchtime. Bakya arrived first. What did I hear? Minjae opened the door. Haneul said her first word. Bakya's face immediately lit up. Really? Minjae nodded proudly. She said, Pa. Bakya immediately hugged Haneul. My goodness. Haneul laughed. Can you say grandma? Bakya waited. Haneul stared at her. Pa. Everyone laughed. Bakya looked betrayed. Why does everyone get, Pa? Minjae tried not to laugh. Maybe it's easier. I raised 3 children, and not one of them appreciated me this much. Minjae laughed. By afternoon, Haneul had discovered that saying, Pa, made everyone react. She began experimenting. Pa. Minjae turned immediately. Yes, Pa. What? Pa, do you need something? She laughed. Minjae narrowed his eyes. You're doing this on purpose. From the doorway, Taewon laughed. Definitely. Minjae pointed at him. Don't encourage her. Haneul looked at Taewon. Taewon froze. Minjae slowly turned toward him. Did she just call you? Taewon smiled. I think so. Minjae laughed. Congratulations. Taewon crouched beside Haneul. Can you say it again? His smile became impossible to hide. That's my first word from her. Minjae raised an eyebrow. Technically, Pa came first. All except second place. That evening, Minjae sat on the porch with Haneul in his lap. Taewon sat beside them. The sky was turning orange over the mountains. Haneul played with Minjae's fingers. Pa. Minjae smiled. Yes. Taewon answered. Yes. She looked between them. Pa. Yes. Yes. She laughed. Minjae laughed too. We're being summoned. Taewon nodded. Apparently. After a while, Haneul grew sleepy. Minjae carried her inside. Before putting her down, he whispered. Thank you. She blinked sleepily. For saying Papa first. Haneul rested her cheek against his shoulder. Minjae smiled. You don't know what that means yet. He gently kissed her forehead. But I'll remember it forever. Later that night, Minjae opened his journal. He wrote slowly. Today, Haneul said her first word. He paused, then continued. Papa. A small smile appeared on his face. He added another sentence. Taewon was there too. He stared at that line for a moment. Then wrote. I'm glad he was. He closed the journal. The next morning, Minjae woke to Haneul babbling in her crib. Pa. His eyes opened. He smiled immediately. Good morning. She laughed. Pa. Minjae walked over and picked her up. Yes. He held her close. I'm here. From outside came the sound of Taewon's voice. Morning. Haneul immediately looked toward the window. Minjae laughed. You're very consistent. He carried her toward the window. Taewon stood outside the fence. Haneul waved excitedly. Taewon waved back. Good morning. Minjae looked between them. Something about the simple moment made his chest feel warm. There had been a time when he was terrified of raising Haneul alone. Now, watching her learn her first words, he realized that she was growing surrounded by people who loved her. And perhaps that was one of the greatest gifts he could give her. Not a perfect life, not a life without difficulties, but a life filled with people who would answer whenever she called. Pa. I'm here. I'm here too. Two simple sounds. Two familiar voices. And one little girl learning that she would never have to call into an empty room. Chapter 9. Summer Rain. Summer arrived sooner than anyone expected. The mornings in Haedam-ri became warm and bright. The orchard was heavy with green leaves. Cicadas had begun singing in the trees. And Haneul had become completely fascinated by water. She loved bath time. She loved splashing in her little basin. She loved watching Taewon water the garden. So when the first summer storm arrived, Minjae should have known there would be trouble. The sky darkened just after lunch. Minjae looked out the window. That's coming this way. Taewon stood on the porch, looking toward the mountains. Definitely. A low rumble of thunder followed. Haneul looked up, then smiled. Minjae blinked. Don't tell me you like thunder. Another rumble. Haneul clapped. Taewon laughed. She does. Of course she does. The rain began suddenly. Within minutes, the roof was covered by a steady drumming sound. The garden disappeared behind a curtain of water. The road outside became shiny and wet. Haneul crawled toward the window. Minjae quickly picked her up. No. She reached toward the glass. You can look, not touch. Haneul pressed both hands against the window anyway. Minjae sighed. You really don't listen. The storm grew stronger. The electricity flickered once, then twice. Minjae looked up. Please don't. The lights flickered again. Taewon glanced toward him. Did you charge your phone? Yes. Flashlight? Yes. Emergency lantern? Yes. Taewon smiled. You've improved. Minjae crossed his arms. I have a baby. You've always been prepared. I've become more prepared. A loud crack of thunder shook the windows. Haneul jumped. Her smile disappeared. She immediately reached for Minjae. Papa. Minjae's expression softened. I'm here. He hugged her close. It's just thunder. Another rumble followed. Haneul buried her face against his chest. Taewon quietly moved closer. It's all right. Haneul peeked at him. Taewon smiled. The sky is just making noise. She looked toward the window. Then back at him. Minjae laughed softly. That's one way to explain it. The electricity finally went out. The house became dark. Haneul made a small sound. Minjae immediately turned on the lantern. There. A warm glow filled the room. Nothing to worry about. Taewon found a second lantern and placed it on the table. Then he opened the kitchen cabinet. We should make dinner before the storm gets worse. Minjae blinked. You're thinking about food. You haven't eaten since lunch. I was watching the weather. You can watch it while eating. They decided to make simple noodles. Unfortunately, Haneul wanted to help. She crawled toward the kitchen. No. Minjae picked her up. You are the smallest chef in this house. She reached toward the counter. You're not tall enough. She protested. Taewon laughed. She's offended. She'll survive. With the rain pounding against the roof, the three of them settled around the dining table. The lanterns made the room feel strangely cozy. Haneul sat between them, happily eating. Minjae listened to the rain. He realized he liked it. Not the way he had once liked city rain. City rain had been noise between buildings. This rain felt different. It surrounded the little house, the mountains, the orchard, the entire village, almost as if the world had become smaller for the night. Taewon looked toward him. What are you thinking? Minjae smiled. That this is nice. Really? Yes. He looked around. No electricity. Rain everywhere. We're eating instant noodles. Taewon smiled. And Minjae looked at Haneul. Still nice. The storm continued. With nothing else to do, Minjae brought out an old board game. Taewon stared at it. You have this. I found it in the storage room. When? Last month. And you never mentioned it. I forgot. They opened it. Haneul immediately grabbed one of the pieces. Minjae took it back. No. She grabbed another. No. Taewon laughed. She's playing. She's destroying. Same thing. Eventually, the game was abandoned. Mostly because Haneul kept eating the pieces. Instead, Minjae made tea. The three sat in the living room. Haneul fell asleep against Taewon's shoulder. Minjae looked at them. You can put her down. She's comfortable. I know. Taewon gently adjusted the blanket around her. Minjae smiled. She trusts you. Taewon looked down at her. I know. For a while, neither spoke. Rain filled the silence. Then Minjae said quietly. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you stay? Taewon looked at him. Tonight. No. Minjae shook his head. Since the beginning. Taewon was silent. Minjae continued. When we first met, You thought I was irresponsible. You thought I was rude. We misunderstood each other. Taewon smiled. We did. But after that, you kept helping. Minjae looked down at his hands. I've wondered about it. Taewon leaned back. I don't know. You don't know. No. He thought for a moment. Maybe I liked having someone next door. Minjae laughed. Even when I annoyed you. Especially then. That's terrible. Taewon smiled. You were interesting. Minjae stared at him. Interesting. You were always trying to do everything yourself. You were stubborn. You argued about everything. You worried too much. Minjae frowned. That doesn't sound very flattering. Taewon laughed. But, his voice softened. I liked seeing you become happier. Minjae became quiet. Taewon looked toward Haneul. At first, you looked like you were just trying to get through each day. Now, he smiled. You laugh more. You write more. You go outside. You talk to people. You let people help. Minjae listened quietly. Taewon continued. I guess I wanted to see what would happen. What would happen if you stayed? The words stayed between them. Minjae looked toward the window. Rain streaked down the glass. I think. He spoke slowly. I wanted to stay too. Taewon looked at him. I just didn't know it at first. A loud thunderclap suddenly shook the house. Haneul stirred. Both men immediately looked down. She remained asleep. Minjae laughed quietly. She didn't even wake up. Taewon smiled. She's getting braver. Maybe. Minjae looked at his daughter. Or maybe she just knows we're here. The rain finally began to weaken around midnight. The electricity returned. The lights flickered back on. Haneul slept peacefully. Minjae stood at the window. The clouds were slowly breaking apart. A faint moon appeared above the mountains. Taewon joined him. Looks like it's ending. Minjae nodded. Yeah. Then he smiled. That was actually nice. Taewon looked at him. Even the thunder. Not the thunder. They both laughed. Before Taewon left, Minjae handed him an umbrella. Take this. I have one. Take it anyway. Taewon accepted it. Thank you. Minjae hesitated. Then said quietly. Come over tomorrow. Taewon looked at him. Why? I made too much noodles. Taewon smiled. You made too much. Maybe. You hate wasting food. I know. So you need help. Exactly. Taewon laughed. All right. After he left, Minjae returned to Haneul's room. She was sleeping peacefully. He gently tucked her blanket around her. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. Everything smelled fresh. The garden glistened under the moonlight. Minjae stood by the window for a moment. Tonight had started with thunder. But somehow, it had ended with something quieter. A conversation. A confession of sorts. Not about romance. Not yet. Just honesty. Two people admitting that somewhere along the way, their lives had become intertwined. Minjae smiled. Then he turned off the light. Good night, Haneul. He closed the door gently. And in the quiet house, the sound of the rain slowly faded into the memory of another ordinary day they had shared together. Chapter 10. Father's Day. The village was unusually secretive that week. Seo Minjae noticed it immediately. Whenever he walked past the community center, conversations suddenly became quieter. Whenever he approached the village children, they whispered to one another. And whenever Haneul saw them, they became suspiciously excited. Minjae narrowed his eyes. Something is happening. Taewon, walking beside him, looked completely innocent. What makes you think that? Everyone is acting strangely. Maybe you're imagining it. Minjae stopped. Taewon stopped too. They stared at each other. You're terrible at lying. Taewon smiled. I wasn't lying. You absolutely were. The mystery continued for several days. Then, on Sunday morning, Minjae found a folded piece of paper tucked beneath his front door. He picked it up. On the front was written in large, uneven letters. For Papa. Minjae froze. Haneul. She was sitting on the floor chewing on a toy. She looked up. Pa. Minjae smiled. No, this isn't from you. He opened the paper. Inside was a simple drawing. 3 people stood beneath a large yellow sun. One figure had very long hair. One had short hair, and the smallest figure stood between them. At the bottom were several colorful hearts. Minjae stared at it. He smiled. This is beautiful. A small voice came from the doorway. Did you get it? Minjae looked up. One of the village children stood there. She immediately covered her mouth. Oh, she had said too much. Minjae laughed. Did you make this? The girl nodded. It's for Father's Day. Minjae blinked. Father's Day. She nodded. We're making things for our dads. She looked at Haneul. She doesn't know how to make one yet. Minjae laughed. Not quite. The girl smiled. Then you can have mine. Minjae looked at the drawing again. Thank you. She ran away. Minjae carefully placed it beside his laptop. Later that afternoon, the community center was filled with children making cards. Minjae had been invited to help supervise. He sat at one of the tables while Haneul played nearby. The children were completely focused. Colored paper covered the tables. Crayons rolled everywhere. Glue somehow ended up on everyone's hands. One boy proudly held up a card. I made Dad a house. Another child raised hers. I made a car. A third announced. I made food. Minjae smiled. What did you draw? The child pointed at a very colorful mess. That's Dad. Minjae nodded seriously. Very accurate. The child laughed. Taewon arrived carrying boxes of snacks. Minjae looked up. You're helping too. I was asked. Everyone was asked. Apparently. Taewon put the boxes down. Haneul immediately crawled toward him. Taewon crouched. Hello. She grabbed his hand. Minjae smiled. She's becoming your assistant. Taewon looked at the crayons. Then we're going to make something. Minjae raised an eyebrow. For whom? Taewon looked at him. That's a secret. Minjae stared. You're all conspiring against me. That evening, Minjae returned home with Haneul. He placed the children's drawing on the shelf. Then he sat on the floor beside his daughter. She was holding a crayon. Minjae handed her a sheet of paper. Do you want to draw? Haneul immediately scribbled across it. Minjae smiled. That's very nice. She scribbled again. And that's. He examined it seriously. Definitely something. Haneul laughed. Minjae took her little hand. Maybe someday you'll make me a Father's Day card. She looked at him. Minjae's heart softened. That's enough. The next morning, Minjae woke to something unusual. The house was quiet. Too quiet. He sat up. Haneul. No answer. His heart jumped. He hurried into the living room. Haneul was sitting safely on her play mat. Taewon was there. And both of them immediately looked guilty. Minjae stared. What are you doing? Taewon held something behind his back. Nothing. Minjae crossed his arms. You both look suspicious. Haneul giggled. Taewon sighed. We were trying to surprise you. Minjae blinked. Surprise me with what? That's the problem. Taewon looked at the small object in his hand. Haneul ate part of it. Minjae laughed. Of course she did. Taewon finally brought it forward. It was a small handmade card. The front had colorful handprints. One was obviously Haneul's. The other was Taewon's. Minjae stared at it. Inside were only a few words. Happy Father's Day, Papa. Underneath was a tiny crooked heart. Minjae's expression softened immediately. You made this. Taewon nodded. Mostly. Haneul helped. She provided the handprint. Minjae looked at the ink-covered edge. She provided quite a lot. Taewon smiled. I thought you might like it. Minjae carefully took the card. He stared at it for a long moment. Then his eyes became wet. Taewon noticed. You don't have to cry. I'm not crying. You are. No, you definitely are. Minjae wiped his eyes. It's allergies. To paper. Very serious paper allergies. Taewon laughed. Minjae laughed too. Haneul clapped, apparently pleased with their reaction. They spent the afternoon together. Taewon cooked lunch. Minjae tried to help. Haneul sat in her high chair and occasionally threw food onto the floor. At one point, Minjae looked around the kitchen. This is strange. Taewon glanced at him. What? I never imagined Father's Day would look like this. Taewon waited. Minjae smiled. When I was younger, I thought being a father meant having everything figured out. He looked at Haneul. I thought I'd know what to do. He laughed softly. I didn't. Taewon placed another plate on the table. Nobody does. Minjae nodded. I've made mistakes. Everyone does. I've been scared. Of course. I've wondered whether I'm doing enough. Taewon sat down. You are. Minjae looked at him. Taewon spoke simply. Look at her. Haneul was happily eating. She's healthy. She's curious. She laughs. She trusts you. Taewon smiled. That's your answer. Minjae looked at his daughter. She noticed him staring. Then smiled. Pa. Minjae smiled back. Yeah. He reached over and gently wiped food from her cheek. I'm here. That afternoon, the village held a small Father's Day gathering. There were no elaborate decorations. Just food, games, and handmade gifts. The children presented their cards to their fathers. Minjae stood toward the back with Haneul in his arms. He watched quietly. There was laughter everywhere. Some fathers were embarrassed by their children's drawings. Some were openly crying. One father received a card covered almost entirely in glue. He proudly held it up anyway. Minjae smiled. Then he felt a small tug on his shirt. Haneul was reaching toward the crowd. Go. Minjae looked down. You want to go? She nodded enthusiastically. All right. They joined the others. One of the children looked at Haneul. Where's her card? Minjae laughed. She's still learning. The child thought about this. Then handed Minjae another sheet of paper. She can use mine. Minjae blinked. Are you sure? The child nodded. Everyone should get one. Minjae looked at the blank paper. Then smiled. Thank you. That night, Minjae placed all the Father's Day cards beside his desk. The children's drawings. The handprint card. The little house. The colorful hearts. He looked at them for a long time. Then opened his journal. I used to think being a father meant being strong. Enough to protect my child from everything. He paused. Now I think it means being there when I can't. Another line. It means learning, apologizing, asking for help, trying again. He looked toward Haneul's bedroom. And loving her through all of it. Before going to bed, Minjae placed Taewon's handmade card in a frame. He hesitated, then placed it beside the family portrait. The picture showed Minjae, Haneul, and Taewon smiling together. The little card rested beside it. For a long moment, Minjae simply stood there. He realized something. He hadn't become a perfect father. He probably never would. But he had become something else. A father who stayed. A father who learned. A father who allowed himself to be loved too. Minjae smiled softly. Happy Father's Day. He whispered the words to himself. Then, from Haneul's room, came a sleepy little voice. Pa. Minjae immediately smiled. I'm here. And he walked toward her. Chapter 11. The Secret Garden. The garden had become Haneul's favorite place. Every morning, the moment Minjae opened the back door, she would crawl toward it. Slow down. Minjae hurried after her. You haven't even put your shoes on. Haneul stopped at the garden gate. Then turned around. Pa. Yes, Papa knows. He picked her up and carried her outside. The morning sunlight was gentle. Flowers swayed in the breeze. The vegetable garden was beginning to fill with green leaves. And near the far end of the yard stood a small patch of unused soil. Minjae had been meaning to clean it. He just hadn't found the time. Taewon arrived carrying a small wooden box. Haneul immediately reached for it. What's that? Taewon crouched beside her. Seeds. Haneul stared at the little packets. Can we plant them? Minjae looked at him. You brought gardening supplies. Taewon nodded. I thought Haneul might like it. Minjae looked at his daughter. She was already trying to grab the packets. Apparently, she does. They sat beside the empty patch of soil. Taewon showed Haneul a small packet. These are flower seeds. Haneul reached for them. Careful. Minjae gently guided her hand. Taewon opened the packet. First, we make a little hole. He used his finger to press into the soil. Then we put the seed inside. Haneul watched carefully. Then immediately poked the soil with her whole hand. Taewon laughed. That's one way to do it. Minjae sighed. She's helping. She's digging. Same thing. Haneul was given her own little gardening shovel. She held it proudly. Then stabbed it into the soil. Minjae smiled. Good job. Taewon nodded seriously. Very professional. Haneul tried again. This time, dirt flew everywhere. Including onto Minjae's shirt. He looked down. Then at Haneul. She smiled. You're lucky you're cute. Taewon laughed. Very lucky. They spent the morning planting seeds. Some went into neat little rows. Others ended up in completely random places. Haneul seemed especially determined to plant hers near the edge of the garden. Minjae tried to move one. She protested immediately. No. Both men froze. Minjae looked at her. Did you just say no? Haneul pointed at the seed. No. Taewon smiled. She's very clear. Minjae laughed. She learned that from me. Taewon raised an eyebrow. Definitely. After planting, Taewon showed Haneul how to water the soil. He handed her a tiny watering can. Just a little. Haneul tipped it. Water poured out. Too much. The soil became a muddy puddle. Taewon quickly caught the can. That's enough. Haneul looked at the puddle. Then at him. Then smiled. Minjae covered his mouth. Don't laugh. I'm not. You are. I'm trying not to. By lunchtime, Haneul was covered in dirt. Her clothes were dirty. Her hands were muddy. There was even a small streak of soil on her cheek. Minjae looked at her. You've accomplished a lot. Haneul proudly held up her muddy hands. Garden. Minjae blinked. Taewon smiled. She said garden. Minjae crouched down. Yes. He gently wiped her cheek. This is your garden. Over the following days, the garden became part of their routine. Every morning, Haneul checked the soil. Every morning, she expected flowers. Every morning, Minjae had to explain that plants needed time. Not yet. Haneul stared at the soil. Not yet. She looked disappointed. Plants don't grow overnight. She crossed her arms. Minjae laughed. You're going to have to learn patience. One morning, Taewon arrived carrying a small wooden sign. He had carved something into it. Minjae looked at it. Haneul's garden. Minjae smiled. You made this. Taewon nodded. I thought she should have a sign. Haneul immediately crawled toward it. She touched the letters. Haneul. Minjae pointed. That's your name. She smiled proudly. Taewon placed the sign beside the garden. Haneul clapped. As the days passed, tiny green shoots finally appeared. Haneul noticed them first. She was outside with Minjae when she suddenly stopped. She pointed at the soil. Pa. Minjae looked down, then froze. Wait. He crouched. There, barely visible above the soil, was the first tiny green sprout. Haneul bounced excitedly. Flower. Not yet. Minjae laughed. But it's growing. Taewon arrived shortly afterward. Haneul immediately pointed toward the sprout. Ta. Taewon crouched beside them. I see it. Flower. Almost. Haneul looked between them. She seemed deeply impressed. Minjae smiled. You've been waiting for this all week. Haneul gently touched the soil. Very carefully this time. That evening, Minjae sat on the porch with Taewon. The garden was quiet. The tiny sprouts were barely visible beneath the fading sunlight. They're so small, Minjae said. Taewon nodded. They'll grow. I know. Minjae smiled. But it makes me think. About what? How everything changes. He looked toward the house. Haneul used to fit in one arm. Now she's walking around the garden. Taewon smiled. She'll be running soon. Don't remind me. Minjae looked at the garden again. I think I've been impatient with myself too. Taewon glanced at him. What do you mean? When I first came here, I wanted everything to get better immediately. My writing. My life. Being a father. He smiled faintly. I thought if I worked hard enough, everything would eventually become easy. And now I think. He looked at the tiny plants. Maybe some things just need time. Taewon nodded. Like plants. Like people. Like families. Minjae looked at him. Exactly. The next morning, Haneul woke up earlier than usual. She crawled toward the back door. Minjae found her sitting there. You want to see your garden? Garden. He smiled. All right. He carried her outside. The morning sun illuminated the tiny patch of green. More sprouts had appeared. Haneul gasped. More. Minjae laughed. Yes. She looked incredibly proud. Then she carefully touched one of the leaves. Minjae gently stopped her. Careful. She pulled her hand back. Plants are living things. Haneul looked at the sprout. Then nodded solemnly. Taewon came by later that morning. Haneul proudly showed him the garden. Look. Taewon smiled. Very nice. Mine. Yes. Garden. Your garden. She clapped. Minjae watched them. Something warm settled in his chest. It wasn't only the garden that was growing. That afternoon, Minjae placed a small chair beside the garden. He imagined Haneul sitting there someday. Reading. Drawing. Maybe helping him with his writing. Maybe bringing Taewon flowers. Maybe complaining that the plants weren't growing quickly enough. He smiled. He could already picture it. Before bed, Minjae wrote in his journal. Haneul has a garden now. He paused. Then added. It's tiny. It's messy. Half the seeds probably aren't where they're supposed to be. He smiled. But it's hers. Another line followed. I think that's what makes it special. The next morning, Haneul ran toward the garden again. A little faster than before. Minjae followed behind her. Taewon stood near the fence, waiting. The three of them looked down at the tiny plants. They were still small. Still fragile. Still growing. But they were there. And somehow, that was enough. Minjae smiled. Let's take care of them. Taewon nodded. Haneul clapped. And together, they watered the little garden. One small drop at a time. Chapter 12. Home cooking. The trouble began with a recipe. More specifically, a recipe that Minjae had no business attempting. Seo Minjae stood in the kitchen holding a handwritten card from Grandma Bakya. He read it again. Then again. This can't be right. Haneul sat in her high chair nearby, happily eating pieces of banana. Taewon leaned against the kitchen doorway. What can't be right? Minjae held up the recipe. She said this is easy. Taewon looked at it. It probably is. Then why are there 14 steps? That's not many. You're not helping. Bakya had decided that Minjae needed to learn several traditional countryside dishes. You live here now, she had told him. You should know how to cook them. Minjae had protested that he already knew how to cook. Bakya had asked him to name 3 dishes. He had named instant noodles, fried eggs, and toast. She had stared at him. Then sighed. So now, he was learning. Today's lesson was a traditional vegetable and meat stew. Taewon had volunteered to help. Minjae suspected Bakya had specifically asked him to. First, Minjae read the recipe. Prepare the vegetables. Taewon began cutting them. Minjae watched. You cut that too quickly. Taewon glanced at him. You want me to go slower? Yes. Taewon deliberately slowed down. Minjae nodded. Better. A few seconds later. Actually, faster. Taewon laughed. You don't know what you want. I know exactly what I want. What? Good food. Haneul began banging her spoon against the tray. Minjae looked over. Are you hungry? Pa. Yes, I know. He picked up a piece of banana. Haneul opened her mouth, then immediately grabbed the spoon instead. No. She held it proudly. That's not food. She tried to eat it. Minjae sighed. You're going to make this difficult. Taewon smiled. She already has. The cooking continued. Onions were chopped. Vegetables were washed. Meat was prepared. Seasonings were measured. Minjae followed every instruction carefully. For once, everything seemed to be going perfectly. Then he added the seasoning. Taewon looked at the pot. How much did you put in? Minjae froze. The amount written. Are you sure? Minjae looked at the recipe. Then at the measuring spoon. Then back at the recipe. Probably. Taewon immediately tasted a tiny amount. His expression became unreadable. Minjae stared at him. What? It's. Taewon paused. Strong. Strong. Very. Minjae tasted it. His eyes widened. Oh. He reached for water. That's not food. Taewon laughed. Haneul watched them with great interest. Minjae pointed toward the pot. See what happens when Papa cooks. Haneul smiled. Don't encourage him. Taewon laughed. I didn't say anything. You looked amused. I am amused. They tried to fix the stew. More water. More vegetables. A little broth. Then another taste. Taewon nodded. Better. Minjae cautiously tasted it. Actually. He looked surprised. It is. Taewon smiled. You can cook. Don't sound so shocked. I'm impressed. Minjae smiled. Thank you. By lunchtime, the kitchen smelled wonderful. Bakya arrived just as they were setting the table. She stopped at the doorway. You cooked. Minjae proudly nodded. I did. She looked at Taewon. And you? I helped. Bakya smiled. Good. Minjae frowned. Why does everyone trust him more than me? Bakya laughed. Because he doesn't burn things. I burned one thing. Three things. Taewon covered his mouth. Minjae pointed at him. Don't laugh. They sat together for lunch. Minjae served the stew. Everyone took a bite. Silence. Minjae looked around nervously. Well. Bakya took another spoonful. It's good. Minjae's shoulders relaxed. Really? Really? Taewon nodded. It is. Minjae smiled. I made this. Bakya raised an eyebrow. You followed the recipe. That still counts. It does. Haneul slapped her tray. Pa. Minjae looked at her. You want some? Bakya immediately stopped him. Not that. Minjae blinked. Right. Too spicy. Right. Haneul looked betrayed. After lunch, Bakya stayed behind to teach Minjae another dish. This time, Taewon was in charge of washing the vegetables. Minjae carefully followed the instructions. He made fewer mistakes. Bakya noticed. You're learning. Minjae smiled. I want Haneul to grow up eating food I make. Bakya looked at him. You don't have to become a perfect cook. I know. But. Minjae looked toward his daughter. I want to be able to give her things. Not just buy them. He smiled. Even if it's something small. Bakya nodded. That's a good reason. Later that afternoon, Haneul sat on the kitchen floor playing with a wooden spoon. Taewon was cleaning the counters. Minjae was writing down recipes. He suddenly looked up. Wait. Taewon turned. What? Do you know how to make all of these? Taewon glanced at the recipe cards. Most of them. Why? My parents worked a lot. I learned to cook when I was young. Minjae looked at him. So you were cooking for yourself? Sometimes. That's sad. Taewon shrugged. It wasn't. He looked at Haneul. You learn things because you need them. Minjae was quiet, then smiled. I think I understand. That evening, Minjae decided to make dinner by himself. Taewon offered to help. Minjae shook his head. I can do it. Taewon smiled. All right. He sat at the table with Haneul. Minjae worked carefully. He chopped. He seasoned. He tasted. He adjusted. He tried again. Finally, he placed the finished dish on the table. Taewon took a bite. He nodded. Good. Minjae smiled proudly. I did it. You did. Haneul reached toward the bowl. Minjae laughed. Not for you yet. After dinner, Minjae packed some leftovers into a container. He handed it to Taewon. For tomorrow. Taewon looked surprised. For me. You helped. You don't have to. I know. Minjae smiled. I want to. Taewon accepted the container. Thank you. The next morning, Minjae woke early. He went into the kitchen before Haneul woke up. For the first time, he wasn't nervous. He opened the refrigerator, looked at the ingredients, and began cooking breakfast. When Haneul eventually crawled into the kitchen, she found her father standing at the stove. Pa. Minjae looked over. Good morning. She smiled. The kitchen smelled warm. The table was ready. Sunlight streamed through the window. Minjae carried her to her chair. Breakfast. Haneul happily clapped. Taewon arrived later. He stopped at the door. You cooked again. Minjae nodded. I did. Taewon tasted the food, then smiled. You're getting good. Minjae looked pleased. I've been practicing. I can tell. Minjae sat down. For a moment, he simply looked around the kitchen. A year ago, he had barely known how to manage a newborn and himself. Now he was learning recipes, growing vegetables, writing books, raising Haneul, and somehow, sharing meals with someone who had become an important part of their lives. He smiled. Food tastes different when you make it for people you care about. Taewon looked at him. Yeah. Haneul happily slapped her spoon against the table. Both men laughed. That evening, Minjae wrote in his journal. Today I learned that cooking isn't really about following a recipe. He thought for a moment. Then added, it's about knowing who you're making the food for. He smiled. The kitchen still smelled faintly of dinner. Haneul was asleep. The dishes were clean, and on the table sat 3 empty bowls. Nothing extraordinary. Just another ordinary meal. But somehow, those were becoming his favorite kind. Chapter 13. A day without work. Seo Minjae had a problem. He had forgotten how to take a day off. It wasn't intentional. He simply woke up every morning with something to do. Writing, editing, cooking, cleaning, taking care of Haneul, checking the garden, answering emails, writing again. So when Taewon appeared at his door on Saturday morning and said, "You're not working today," Minjae stared at him. "Excuse me." Taewon folded his arms. "You're taking the day off." "I'm busy." "No. I have a deadline. Tomorrow. I have emails. They can wait. I need to check the manuscript." "You checked it last night." Minjae narrowed his eyes. "Are you trying to control my schedule?" "Yes." Minjae blinked. Taewon smiled. "Get ready." 20 minutes later, Minjae stood outside his house holding Haneul. He looked at Taewon. "Where are we going?" "Out." "That's not a destination. You'll find out." Minjae sighed. "You planned this?" "Yes." "With who?" Taewon looked toward the road. "Everyone." Minjae immediately became suspicious. They walked toward the village bus stop. Haneul sat comfortably in her stroller, looking around with great interest. Minjae glanced at Taewon. "Are we taking the bus?" "Yes." "Where?" "There's a small riverside market a few villages away." Minjae's eyes widened. "You planned a family trip?" Taewon nodded. Minjae looked down at Haneul. Then back at Taewon. "I haven't done this in a long time." "I know." The bus arrived. They climbed aboard. Haneul immediately became fascinated by the windows. She pointed at everything. Trees. Houses. Cars. A dog. Another bus. A mountain. Minjae laughed. She's seeing everything for the first time. Taewon sat beside them. That's what makes traveling with a baby interesting. Haneul pointed at a passing chicken. Bird. Minjae blinked. That's a chicken. Taewon laughed. Close enough. Minjae smiled. She's learning. The riverside market was small but lively. Stalls lined the street. Farmers sold vegetables. Local vendors sold handmade crafts. The smell of grilled food filled the air. Haneul immediately became excited. Minjae looked around. I haven't been here before. You've been busy. Apparently. Taewon smiled. Today you're not. They walked slowly through the market. No schedules. No deadlines. No manuscript. Minjae realized he kept reaching for his phone. Every few minutes. Checking the time. Checking messages. Checking his email. Eventually Taewon reached over and gently took the phone from his hand. Hey, no work. I'm not working. You were checking your email. That's not working. Taewon held the phone just out of reach. It is today. Minjae stared at him. Give it back. No. Taewon. No. Minjae tried to grab it. Taewon raised his arm. Minjae frowned. You're enjoying this. A little. Haneul started laughing. Minjae looked at her. Don't encourage him. She laughed harder. Taewon smiled. She's on my side. Traitor. They eventually stopped at a small riverside restaurant. The owner recognized Taewon. You're from Haedam-ri, aren't you? Yes. The owner smiled. And this? He looked at Minjae and Haneul. My family. The words came out naturally. Minjae froze. Taewon seemed to realize what he'd said only afterward. The restaurant owner simply smiled. Then welcome. Minjae looked down at Haneul. Something warm settled in his chest. They ordered lunch. Haneul had her own small meal. Minjae ate slowly. He wasn't thinking about his manuscript. He wasn't thinking about his publisher. He wasn't thinking about the next chapter. He was simply sitting beside two people he cared about. When lunch arrived, Haneul reached toward Taewon's plate. Taewon immediately moved it away. That's mine. Haneul stared. Taewon stared back. Minjae burst out laughing. You've met your match. After lunch, they walked along the riverside. The afternoon sun was warm. The river moved quietly beside them. Haneul eventually fell asleep in her stroller. Minjae slowed his steps. She's tired. Taewon nodded. Let's sit. They found a bench beneath a large tree. Minjae sat down. For a while, neither spoke. It was peaceful. Minjae looked at the river. I can't remember the last time I did nothing. Taewon smiled. You're doing something now. What? Nothing. Minjae laughed. Right. He leaned back. The breeze moved through the trees. I thought taking a break would make me anxious. Does it? A little. Taewon looked at him. But, Minjae watched Haneul sleeping. I think I needed this. Taewon smiled. I know. A few minutes later, Haneul woke. She looked around sleepily. Then reached toward Minjae. Pa, I'm here. He lifted her from the stroller. She rested her head against his chest. Taewon looked at them. She's comfortable. Minjae smiled. So am I. The words surprised him. He realized he meant them. They spent the rest of the afternoon doing absolutely nothing important. They bought a small toy for Haneul. They ate ice cream. Minjae accidentally got some on his nose. Taewon laughed at him. They sat near the river. Haneul tried to feed Taewon a piece of her snack. She dropped it instead. They laughed. Nothing extraordinary happened. And that was exactly what made the day special. On the bus ride home, Minjae looked out the window. Haneul was asleep again. Taewon sat beside them. Minjae finally spoke. Thank you. Taewon looked over. For what? For forcing me to take a day off. I didn't force you. You stole my phone. Temporarily. You threatened my email. I protected you from your email. Minjae laughed. Same thing. The bus reached Haedam-ri just before sunset. They walked home together. The village was quiet. The mountains were painted orange by the setting sun. Minjae looked at his house. Then at Haneul. Then at Taewon. He smiled. I think I understand something now. What? Rest isn't wasting time. Taewon nodded. No. Minjae smiled. Sometimes it's part of living. That evening, Minjae sat at his desk. His laptop was open. His manuscript waited. He looked at it, then closed the laptop. Haneul was asleep. The house was quiet. Taewon had already gone home. Minjae stood by the window. He wasn't anxious anymore. He didn't need to write tonight. He didn't need to accomplish anything. He simply needed to be present. He opened his journal instead. Today, I did nothing important. He paused, then smiled. And somehow, it became one of my favorite days. He closed the journal. Outside, the evening breeze moved gently through the trees. Inside, his little house was warm and quiet. Tomorrow, he would return to his manuscript. There would be deadlines, emails, work, responsibilities. But tonight, he was simply a father. A man who had spent a day with his daughter. A man who had laughed with someone he was slowly learning to trust. And a man who was finally understanding that life wasn't something to rush through. Sometimes, the most precious moments were the ones that had nowhere else to be. Chapter 14. The Things We Don't Say. The first thing Seo Minjae noticed was the silence. Usually, Taewon knocked on his door in the morning. Sometimes he brought vegetables. Sometimes he brought something from the orchard. Sometimes he simply appeared with an excuse that wasn't really an excuse. But that morning, nothing. Minjae looked through the window. The road outside was empty. He frowned. Haneul sat on the floor nearby, playing with her wooden blocks. Where's Ta? Haneul looked up. Ta. Minjae smiled. Exactly. He tried not to think about it. There was no reason for Taewon to visit every day. They weren't. Minjae stopped himself. He didn't know what they were. Friends. Neighbors. Family friends. Something else. He shook the thought away. Papa's overthinking again. Haneul knocked down her blocks. Pa. Yes. Minjae picked them up. We're not going to think about it. But Taewon didn't come the next day either. Or the day after. On the third day, Minjae finally noticed how strange the house felt. There was no basket left at the door. No quiet voice asking whether he'd eaten. No one stealing his kitchen counter while preparing vegetables. No one sitting on the porch while Haneul played. Minjae stared at the empty chair beside the garden. He didn't like how much he noticed. He tried calling. He stopped before pressing the button. What am I doing? He put the phone down. Maybe Taewon was busy. Maybe the orchard needed him. Maybe something had happened. Minjae picked up the phone again. Then put it down. He sighed. I don't even know what I'm allowed to ask. Haneul looked at him. Pa, I know. He smiled weakly. Papa doesn't know either. Meanwhile, Taewon stood alone in the orchard. He had been avoiding Minjae. He knew it. And he hated himself for it. Nothing had happened. That was the problem. Everything had been happening slowly. The meals. The garden. The trips. The evenings on the porch. The way Minjae trusted him with Haneul. The way Minjae looked for him without realizing he was doing it. The way Taewon had begun thinking of the little house as somewhere he belonged. And then there had been that day by the river. Minjae had looked at him and said, "So am I." Taewon had thought about those words ever since. He had finally admitted the truth to himself. His feelings weren't simply affection. They weren't just friendship. They had become something deeper. Something he couldn't pretend not to see anymore. And that frightened him. That afternoon, Minjae went to the village store. He ran into Bakya. Minjae. Yes. You look tired. I didn't sleep well. She studied him. Taewon hasn't been around, has he? Minjae froze. You noticed. Everyone noticed. Minjae looked away. I don't know what's wrong. Bakya didn't answer immediately. Then she said gently. Sometimes people become quiet when they're trying to understand something inside themselves. Minjae frowned. Did something happen? Maybe. Did he tell you? No. Minjae looked disappointed. Bakya smiled softly. Don't force an answer out of him. I'm not trying to. You are. Minjae sighed. Maybe a little. That evening, Minjae sat on the porch alone. Haneul slept inside. The garden moved gently in the evening breeze. He stared at the empty chair beside him. He remembered how Taewon had sat there only days ago. How easy everything had felt. How natural. Now, the silence felt enormous. Minjae hugged his knees. I miss him. The words slipped out before he could stop them. He stared at the ground. Then whispered. Why? The next morning, Taewon finally came. Minjae was outside watering the garden. He heard footsteps. His heart immediately jumped. He turned. Taewon stood by the gate. For a moment, neither spoke. Haneul crawled toward him. Ta. Taewon's expression softened. He crouched down. Hi. Haneul reached for him. He picked her up. Minjae watched quietly. Something about seeing them together made the tightness in his chest loosen. Then return. Where have you been? Taewon looked at him. Busy. Minjae knew immediately. It wasn't the whole truth. Busy. At the orchard. You could have called. Taewon looked away. I know. Minjae set the watering can down. Did I do something? Taewon immediately looked at him. No. Then why are you avoiding me? I'm not. You are. Taewon fell silent. Minjae's voice softened. If I did something, you didn't. Then tell me. Taewon couldn't. Because the truth was too difficult to say. I realized I love you. I realized I want to stay. I realized Haneul isn't the only reason I keep coming here. Instead, he said, I just needed some time. Minjae stared at him. Time for what? Taewon looked down at Haneul. To think. Minjae's expression changed. He wanted to ask. He wanted to demand an explanation. But something stopped him, so he simply nodded. Okay. Taewon looked surprised. You understand? No. Minjae smiled faintly. But I can respect it. Taewon lowered his gaze. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. I made you worry. A little. Minjae laughed quietly. Actually. He looked at him. A lot. Taewon's expression softened. I know. Haneul suddenly reached toward the garden. Flower. Minjae smiled. Yes. He took her from Taewon. Come on. Taewon watched as father and daughter walked toward the flowers. After a few steps, Minjae looked back. You can stay. Taewon blinked. What? You don't have to leave just because you needed time. Minjae smiled. The chair is still there. Taewon looked toward the porch. The empty chair. Then back at Minjae. Something inside his chest tightened. Thank you. That afternoon, Taewon stayed. He didn't explain everything. Minjae didn't ask again. They simply returned to the rhythm they knew. Haneul played in the garden. Taewon fixed a loose fence board. Minjae wrote at the table outside. Every now and then, they exchanged glances. Nothing was said, but somehow, the silence felt different, not empty, just full of things neither of them was ready to say. That evening, after Taewon left, Minjae opened his journal. He wrote, Taewon came back today. He paused, then continued. I wanted to ask him what changed. Another line, but maybe I already know that something did. He looked toward the window. I don't know what we're becoming. His pen stopped. Then he wrote one final sentence. But I don't want him to disappear from our lives. Minjae closed the journal. Outside, Taewon's footsteps slowly faded down the road. Neither of them had said what they were feeling. Not yet. But the distance between them had changed. And sometimes, the things people don't say are the things that speak the loudest. Chapter 15. Don't disappear. The next morning, Taewon didn't come. Again, Minjae told himself it was fine. He had work. Haneul had breakfast. The garden needed watering. There were dishes in the sink. There were emails waiting. There was plenty to do. So why did he keep looking toward the gate? Pa. Minjae looked down. Haneul was sitting on the floor, holding one of her blocks. What? She pointed toward the window. Ta. Minjae went quiet. She was looking for him too. He smiled faintly. Not today. Haneul frowned. Minjae's heart sank. I don't know why. By afternoon, Minjae couldn't take it anymore. He placed Haneul in her stroller and walked toward the orchard. He found Taewon near the far end, repairing one of the fences. Taewon looked up. The moment he saw Minjae, his hand stopped. Minjae. Why? Taewon frowned. Why? What? Why are you avoiding us? I'm not. You are. Minjae stepped closer. You disappeared. Taewon looked away. I needed some space. You already said that. And I meant it. How much space do you need? Taewon didn't answer. Minjae's frustration grew. 3 days. 5. A week. Are you planning to disappear every time something gets difficult? Taewon finally looked at him. No. Then tell me what's wrong. Silence. The wind moved through the orchard. Haneul made a small sound from her stroller. Taewon glanced at her. Then at Minjae. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why does it feel like I'm being punished? Taewon's expression tightened. I'm not punishing you. Then what are you doing? I don't know. The honesty stopped Minjae. Taewon looked down. I don't know what to do with what I'm feeling. Minjae's heart skipped. What you're feeling? Taewon closed his eyes briefly. I care about you. I care about Haneul. More than I expected. Minjae stared at him. Taewon continued quietly. And that's the problem. Why is that a problem? Because I don't know where I fit. Taewon looked toward the little house in the distance. You already have a life. You're Haneul's father. You're a novelist. You have responsibilities. Minjae frowned. And you think you don't belong in that life. I don't know. That's why you've been avoiding us. Taewon nodded. I thought it would be easier. Minjae's voice became quiet. It wasn't. Taewon looked at him. Was it? Minjae shook his head. No. He looked down at Haneul. She keeps asking for you. Then he looked back at Taewon. And so do I. Taewon went completely still. Minjae realized what he had said. But he didn't take it back. I don't understand what we're becoming either. His voice trembled slightly. But I know I don't want you to disappear. Taewon looked at him for a long moment. Minjae. No. Minjae shook his head. You don't get to say you need space and then decide for all of us that disappearing is better. I can handle the uncertainty. I can handle being confused. I can even handle being scared. He took a breath. But I can't handle you leaving without telling me why. Taewon's expression softened. I'm sorry. Minjae's eyes became wet. I don't need another apology. Then what do you need? Minjae hesitated. Finally, he answered honestly. You. The word hung between them. Neither moved. Minjae looked away, embarrassed by his own honesty. I don't know what that means yet. But I know I want you here. Taewon's eyes softened. Minjae, stay. Taewon slowly walked toward him. He stopped only a step away. I was afraid. Of what? That if I stayed. He looked at Haneul. I'd want more. Minjae's breath caught. More. Taewon nodded. More time. More ordinary days. More dinners. More mornings. He looked directly at Minjae. More of you. Minjae's eyes widened. Taewon gave a small, helpless smile. That's what I've been trying to understand. Minjae didn't know what to say. So he reached for Taewon's hand. Taewon looked down at their hands. Minjae's fingers trembled slightly. You could have told me. I was scared. So was I. Taewon gently squeezed his hand. I'm still scared. Me too. Neither let go. Haneul suddenly made a loud sound from the stroller. Both men turned. She was holding her stuffed rabbit above her head. Minjae laughed through his tears. She's been waiting for us to stop talking. Taewon smiled. Probably. Haneul reached toward him. Ta. Taewon immediately crouched and picked her up. She rested against his shoulder as if he had never been gone. Minjae watched them. His heart felt lighter. On the walk home, Taewon pushed the stroller while Minjae carried Haneul. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. At the gate, Taewon stopped. Can I come inside? Minjae smiled. You don't have to ask. Taewon looked at him. I think I needed to hear that. That evening, they ate dinner together. Nothing special. Just rice, vegetables, and leftovers. Haneul made a mess. Minjae complained. Taewon laughed. It felt ordinary again. And somehow, that ordinary feeling was precious. Later, after Haneul fell asleep, Minjae stood on the porch. Taewon joined him. I won't disappear again. Minjae looked at him. Promise. Taewon nodded. Promise. Minjae smiled. Good. They stood quietly beside each other. Neither of them said the word they were both beginning to understand. Not yet. But the distance between them had finally closed. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 16. I'm afraid. The morning after Taewon's promise felt strangely normal. Perhaps that was what made it so comforting. Taewon arrived early. Haneul greeted him with an excited ta. Minjae prepared breakfast. Taewon washed the vegetables. Haneul made a mess. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything felt different. There was a quiet awareness between Minjae and Taewon now. Neither of them had said what they were becoming. But neither was pretending anymore. After breakfast, Taewon helped Minjae clean the kitchen. Haneul sat nearby with her toys. Minjae washed the dishes. Taewon dried them. Their hands occasionally brushed when they reached for the same plate. Every time it happened, Minjae became strangely aware of it. Finally, Taewon noticed. You've been quiet. I'm thinking. About. Minjae hesitated. You. Taewon stopped drying the plate. Me. Minjae nodded. About us. Taewon carefully placed the plate down. Do you want to talk about it? Minjae nodded. Outside. They stepped onto the porch. Haneul remained safely inside with her toys. The morning was peaceful. Minjae sat down. Taewon sat beside him. For a while, Minjae said nothing. Then, I'm afraid. Taewon's expression softened. Of me? No. Minjae shook his head. Of this. He looked down at his hands. Whatever this is becoming. Taewon listened quietly. Minjae took a breath. I know I care about you. I know Haneul cares about you. And, he hesitated. I think I'm starting to feel something more. Taewon didn't interrupt. Minjae continued. That's what scares me. Why? Because I'm not alone. His voice became softer. If I make a mistake, it's not just me who gets hurt. He looked toward the window. Haneul is part of this too. Taewon understood. Minjae wasn't afraid of loving him. He was afraid of what love could change. I've spent so long trying to protect her. I can't just make decisions because I want something. Taewon nodded. I know. Minjae looked at him. What if I get it wrong? What if I think this is right now, and later? He couldn't finish. Taewon gently placed his hand beside Minjae's. Not grabbing, not forcing, just there. You don't have to decide everything today. Minjae looked at him. I know. You don't have to promise me forever. I know. You don't even have to call this anything yet. Minjae's eyes softened. But, Taewon smiled. You don't have to be afraid alone. Minjae looked down at their hands. Slowly, he placed his hand over Taewon's. I don't know how to do this. Taewon squeezed his hand gently. Neither do I. That made Minjae laugh. That's reassuring. I'm serious. I know. Taewon smiled. We can learn. A loud crash came from inside. Both men immediately turned. Haneul. They rushed inside. A tower of wooden blocks had fallen over. Haneul sat in the middle of it. She looked at them, then laughed. Minjae covered his face. You scared me. Taewon crouched beside her. Are you alright? Haneul nodded, then held up a block. Pa. Minjae laughed. Yes. Ta. Taewon smiled. Yes. Haneul held both blocks toward them, as if asking them to rebuild. Minjae looked at Taewon. She's telling us to start over. Taewon smiled. Then let's start over. They rebuilt the tower together. Haneul knocked it down again. Minjae stared at her. Again. She laughed. Taewon chuckled. She's practicing. Practicing what? Starting over. Minjae smiled. Maybe we can learn from her. Later that afternoon, Minjae sat at his desk. For the first time in several days, he wrote without forcing himself. His story wasn't about romance. It wasn't about perfect families. It was simply about people learning how to stay. He stopped typing, then looked toward the garden. Taewon was outside with Haneul. Haneul was trying to water the flowers. Most of the water was landing on Taewon's shoes. He didn't seem to mind. Minjae smiled. Maybe love didn't have to arrive dramatically. Maybe it could look like this. Someone showing up. Someone staying. Someone learning the shape of your life before asking to become part of it. That evening, after Haneul fell asleep, Minjae and Taewon sat on the porch. The sky was clear. The garden was quiet. Minjae spoke first. I'm still afraid. I know. But I don't want fear to make the decision for me. Taewon looked at him. Minjae smiled. I want to take my time. We can. I want Haneul to be okay. She will be. And, Minjae hesitated. I want to see where this goes. Taewon's expression softened. Me too. They sat quietly. Their shoulders touched. Neither moved away. Minjae looked toward the house. Then at Taewon. I can't promise you everything. Taewon smiled. I didn't ask for everything. What do you want? Taewon thought for a moment. Tomorrow. Minjae blinked. Tomorrow. And the day after. He smiled. Just let me be here. Minjae's eyes softened. Okay. Inside the house, Haneul slept peacefully. Outside, the garden moved gently in the evening breeze. Nothing had been officially decided. No promises of forever. No dramatic confession. Just two people admitting that they were afraid. And choosing not to run away because of it. For Minjae, that was already a big step. He had spent so long believing that love was something dangerous because it could hurt the people he cared about. Now he was beginning to understand something else. Love could also mean being careful. Being honest. Taking things slowly. And choosing, every day, to stay. Chapter 17. Back to Seoul. The train station was already crowded when Seo Minjae arrived. He stood beside the platform with Haneul in his arms, a diaper bag hanging from one shoulder and a suitcase beside him. He looked exhausted. They hadn't even boarded yet. Taewon stood next to him, holding the larger suitcase. Minjae stared at the crowd. Why did I agree to this? Taewon smiled. Because your publisher invited you. I could have declined. You could have. Minjae sighed. You're supposed to encourage me. I am. This doesn't feel encouraging. Taewon laughed. Haneul, meanwhile, was having the time of her life. She watched the trains arriving and leaving. Every time one passed, her eyes widened. Train. Minjae smiled. Yes. Big train. Very big. Haneul pointed excitedly. Taewon crouched beside her. Are you ready? Ready. Minjae looked at Taewon. She doesn't even know what she's ready for. Neither do you. Fair. When their train arrived, they boarded. Minjae found their seats and immediately began organizing everything. Diapers, wipes, bottles, snacks, toys, extra clothes, blanket, more snacks. Taewon watched. How long are we staying? 3 days. Are you sure? Yes. Because it looks like we're staying 3 months. Minjae ignored him. Haneul grabbed one of the snack bags. Not yet. She frowned. Taewon laughed. She's already learning. The train began moving. Haedam-ri slowly disappeared beyond the window. Haneul pressed both hands against the glass. Minjae watched her. The countryside became smaller. Then the mountains. Then the familiar village roads. He felt a strange ache in his chest. Taewon noticed. You're thinking about home. Minjae nodded. We haven't even left for an hour. And I miss it already. Taewon smiled. That's a good thing. Minjae looked at him. Yeah. He smiled. It is. The first hour passed peacefully. Haneul played with her toys. Then ate. Then played again. Then became bored. Then crawled onto Minjae's lap. Then tried to climb onto Taewon. Taewon caught her. Hello. Haneul laughed. Minjae shook his head. She has too much energy. She's a baby. She's a very energetic baby. Eventually, Haneul fell asleep against Taewon's chest. Minjae looked at them. You're comfortable. Taewon nodded. She's comfortable. Minjae smiled. She really trusts you. Taewon looked down at her sleeping face. I trust her too. Minjae laughed. That's not how it works. Why not? Because she can't even reach the sink. Taewon smiled. Still, Minjae looked out the window. After a while, he spoke quietly. Do you remember when we first met? Taewon smiled. You mean when you thought I was trying to steal your groceries? I didn't think you were stealing them. You accused me. I asked what you were doing. You said, put that down. You were holding my bag. You thought I was a thief. I was confused. Taewon laughed. We really didn't get along. Minjae smiled. No. He looked at Haneul. Funny. What? How much has changed? The train continued toward Seoul. For Minjae, the city had once represented everything he was trying to leave behind. Work, pressure, loneliness, expectations. Now he was returning. But this time, he wasn't returning alone. Haneul was sleeping beside him. Taewon was sitting across from him. And when Minjae looked at the city waiting beyond the window, he didn't feel like he was going back to his old life. He was simply visiting, then returning home. By afternoon, the city appeared. Tall buildings replaced the mountains. Traffic filled the roads. The familiar noise returned. Minjae stared through the window. It's loud. Taewon smiled. You said that last time. I remember. Haneul woke up. She looked outside. Then at Minjae. Where? Seoul. She repeated it carefully. Seoul. Minjae smiled. That's right. They arrived at the hotel arranged by Minjae's publisher. The moment they entered the lobby, Minjae was greeted by his editor. There you are. She smiled. You made it. Minjae nodded. Yes. Then she looked at Haneul. And this must be the famous Haneul. Haneul stared at her, then hid behind Minjae's leg. Minjae laughed. She's shy. That's okay. His editor smiled. Welcome to Seoul, little one. After settling into their room, Minjae looked around. Everything was clean, modern, expensive, quiet, and completely unfamiliar. He sat on the edge of the bed. I used to think hotels like this were exciting. Taewon placed their bags down. And now, I'd rather be on our porch. Taewon smiled. Home has spoiled you. I think it has. That evening, Minjae had a short meeting with his publisher. Taewon stayed with Haneul. When Minjae returned, he found Haneul asleep on the bed. Taewon sat beside her, reading one of her picture books. Minjae stopped at the doorway. The sight made him smile. You're reading upside down. Taewon looked at the book. I am. Minjae laughed quietly. How long have you been doing that? Long enough. Taewon closed the book. How was the meeting? Good. They're excited about the event. Minjae sat beside him. I'm nervous. You'll be fine. I have to speak in front of hundreds of people. You've spoken in front of the village. That's different. How? They know me. Taewon smiled. Then let the people in Seoul meet the person Haedam-ri knows. Minjae looked at him. What does that mean? The person who writes. The person who cooks. The person who worries too much. The person who loves his daughter. Taewon smiled. Just be yourself. Minjae was quiet. Then he smiled. Thank you. Taewon nodded. Always. Later that night, Minjae stood by the hotel window. Seoul stretched endlessly beneath the lights. Once, he had dreamed of this city. He had wanted success, recognition, a bigger career. Now, he looked at his sleeping daughter. Then at Taewon. He smiled. Maybe dreams changed. Maybe growing up meant realizing that the things you once chased weren't necessarily the things that made you happy. He didn't regret his old dreams. They had brought him here. But his life had become bigger than his career. Before sleeping, Minjae opened his journal. He wrote, I'm back in Seoul. He paused, then added, it feels different this time. Another line, maybe because I know where home is now. He looked toward Haneul, then toward Taewon. And who is waiting there? He closed the journal. Outside, Seoul continued glowing. Inside the hotel room, his little family slept peacefully. Tomorrow, he would stand in front of hundreds of people and talk about his novel. But tonight, he was simply grateful. He had returned to the city he once thought he needed. And somehow, he had never felt more certain about where he belonged. Chapter 18. The train ride home. The publisher's event ended later than Minjae expected. By the time he stepped outside the building, the evening sky had already begun to darken. He stopped on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. It's over. Taewon stood beside him, holding Haneul. How do you feel? Minjae thought about it. Tired. Taewon smiled. Anything else? Minjae looked back at the building. Happy. He smiled. I think it went well. The event had been much bigger than Minjae expected. There had been readers waiting for him. People had asked questions about his novel. Some had told him that his stories had helped them through difficult times. His publisher had been pleased. Even the interview had gone smoothly. But the moment that stayed with him most wasn't the applause. It was seeing Taewon and Haneul sitting together near the back. Haneul had been holding her little rabbit. Taewon had been quietly keeping her entertained while Minjae spoke. Whenever Minjae looked toward them, they were there. You were good. Taewon's voice brought him back. Minjae smiled. You already told me that. I mean it. I know. Minjae looked at Haneul. She behaved surprisingly well. Taewon laughed. She only tried to escape twice. That's still impressive. They returned to the hotel to collect their things. The room looked different now. Their bags were packed. The temporary little space they had created over the past few days was disappearing. Minjae folded Haneul's clothes. Taewon checked the luggage. Minjae looked around. Strange. What? We've only been here a few days. He smiled. But I already want to go home. Taewon stopped. Home. Minjae nodded. Haedam-ri. Taewon smiled. Me too. The next morning, they boarded the train. Haneul was wide awake. She seemed determined to watch everything outside the window. Minjae sat beside her. Taewon sat across from them. As the train began moving, Seoul slowly disappeared behind them. Tall buildings became smaller. Then the city gave way to suburbs. Then fields. Then mountains. Minjae watched quietly. Taewon noticed. You're quiet. I'm thinking. About the event. Partly. Minjae looked at him. And about us. Taewon became still. Minjae smiled faintly. Don't worry. I'm not asking you to answer anything. He looked down at Haneul. I realized something while I was standing on that stage. What? I kept looking for you. Taewon's expression softened. Every time I finished answering a question, I looked toward the back. Minjae laughed quietly. I wanted to see if you were still there. Taewon lowered his eyes. I was. I know. Haneul suddenly reached for Taewon's hand. Taewon smiled and gave her his finger. She held it tightly. Minjae watched them. She's going to be disappointed when we get home. Why? Because she won't have you sitting beside her all day. Taewon smiled. Then I'll visit. Minjae looked at him. You promise? I promise. The train continued through the countryside. For a while, nobody spoke. Then Taewon quietly said, Minjae. I'm glad you came. Minjae smiled. To Seoul. With me. Minjae looked at him. Taewon continued. I was worried that after everything we talked about, you might change your mind. Minjae shook his head. I haven't. Are you sure? Minjae looked out at the passing countryside. I'm still afraid. Taewon nodded. So am I. But, Minjae turned toward him. I'm not running away. Taewon smiled. Neither am I. Haneul eventually fell asleep. Minjae gently adjusted her blanket. The train rocked softly beneath them. Taewon watched Minjae. You did well. Minjae looked up. At the event. Being a father. Minjae blinked. What? You were nervous. You kept checking on her. You still managed to speak in front of everyone. Taewon smiled. And when she got restless, you didn't panic. Minjae laughed. I absolutely panicked. Quietly. Still panicking. Taewon smiled. You handled it. Minjae looked down at Haneul. She's the reason I can do things I never thought I could. Taewon nodded. She's lucky. Minjae smiled. She's lucky to have you too. Taewon became quiet. Minjae realized what he had said. But this time, he didn't take it back. The mountains outside became familiar. Minjae recognized the roads, the fields, the small villages. Then finally, Haedam-ri. His heart lifted. There. Taewon looked out the window. I see it. Minjae smiled. We're almost home. When they arrived at the station, the evening air felt completely different from Seoul. Cooler. Quieter. Familiar. Haneul woke as they stepped outside. She looked around. Then smiled. Home. Minjae froze. Taewon looked at him. Did she just say? Minjae smiled through the sudden warmth in his eyes. She did. He picked her up. Yes. He kissed her forehead. We're home. The walk from the station was slow. Haneul wanted to look at everything. Minjae didn't mind. He had missed this road. The trees. The quiet houses. The familiar mountains. The little convenience store. The sound of insects in the evening. And when they finally reached their house, the garden was waiting. The tiny flowers Haneul had planted had grown. Not much, but enough. Haneul immediately reached toward them. Garden. Minjae laughed. Yes. Taewon smiled. She missed it. They entered the house. Everything felt familiar again. Minjae placed their bags down. Haneul crawled across the floor toward her toys. Taewon opened the windows. Fresh countryside air filled the room. Minjae stood quietly in the middle of the living room. He looked around, then smiled. We're really home. Taewon looked at him. Yes. Later that night, after Haneul fell asleep, Minjae and Taewon sat on the porch. The stars were visible again. No city lights. No traffic. No crowds. Just the quiet village. Minjae leaned back. I thought going back to Seoul would make me miss my old life. Taewon looked at him. Did it? No. Minjae smiled. It made me realize how much I like this one. Taewon smiled. I'm glad. Minjae turned toward him. I don't know what will happen between us. Taewon nodded. Neither do I. But I want to find out. Taewon's eyes softened. Me too. They sat quietly. No confession. No dramatic promise. Just the quiet understanding that they had chosen to keep moving forward. Together. Before going to bed, Minjae opened his journal. He wrote, we went back to Seoul. I stood in front of hundreds of people and talked about my stories. He paused, then smiled. But the best part was coming home. Another line followed. Maybe home isn't the place where we started. Maybe it's the place we choose to return to. He closed the journal. Outside, Taewon was saying goodnight before heading home. Minjae looked through the window. See you tomorrow. Taewon smiled. Tomorrow. The gate closed behind him. Minjae watched until Taewon disappeared down the road. Then he looked toward Haneul's room. His daughter was asleep. His manuscript was waiting. His garden was growing. And the house was quiet. For the first time, Minjae didn't wonder where his life was going. He was already living it. Chapter 19. After everyone goes home. The house had never been this quiet. Only a few hours ago, it had been filled with laughter. Voices. Footsteps. Children running through the yard. The smell of food drifting from the kitchen. And Haneul's delighted laughter whenever someone sang to her. Now, there was only silence. Seo Minjae stood in the middle of the living room. He looked around. Paper decorations still hung from the walls. A few balloons remained near the window. There were cups on the table. A small birthday cake sat unfinished in the kitchen. Minjae let out a tired breath. It's really over. Haneul's first birthday had been wonderful. The village had come together. Bakya had prepared too much food. Mrs. Han had brought a picture book. The children had made drawings for Haneul. Someone had even brought a tiny birthday crown. Haneul had worn it for approximately 3 minutes before trying to eat it. Minjae smiled at the memory. She had changed so much. A year ago, she had been so tiny. Now she was walking, saying words, laughing, calling for Papa, calling for Taewon. 1 year. It had passed so quickly. Minjae picked up a small paper decoration from the floor. He smiled. Then his eyes became unexpectedly wet. You're one already. He looked toward Haneul. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by her new toys. She looked perfectly content. How did that happen? Haneul looked up. Pa. Minjae laughed softly. Yes. He walked over and picked her up. My little baby isn't a baby anymore. Haneul rested against his shoulder. Minjae kissed her hair. But you'll always be my baby. A quiet voice came from the kitchen. Need help? Minjae looked over. Taewon stood there holding a stack of plates. You're still here. Taewon smiled. I was helping clean. Everyone else left. I know. Minjae smiled. You could have gone home. I could have. But. Taewon looked at him. I wanted to stay. Minjae didn't answer. He simply watched Taewon carry the plates to the kitchen. Something about the simple scene made his heart ache. The party was over. Everyone had gone home. But Taewon was still here. Just like he always was. Minjae looked down at Haneul. Then toward the kitchen. He quietly smiled. They cleaned together. Minjae gathered the decorations. Taewon washed the dishes. Haneul crawled, or rather, toddled, between them. She was determined to help. Unfortunately, her version of helping involved stealing napkins. Give that to Papa. Haneul shook her head. No. Minjae laughed. She said no. Taewon smiled. She's getting independent, too. Independent. Eventually, the house was clean. The decorations remained. Minjae decided to leave them up for another day. He didn't want to take them down yet. The first birthday was over. He wasn't ready to let the day disappear completely. Taewon noticed. Leave them. Minjae looked at him. Really? Yes. They'll look silly tomorrow. So. Minjae smiled. You're right. They stepped outside. The evening had become cool. The garden was quiet. A few birthday decorations moved gently in the breeze. Minjae sat on the porch. Taewon sat beside him. Haneul played between them. For a while, nobody spoke. Then Minjae said quietly, "Thank you." Taewon looked at him. "For today, you don't have to thank me. I want to." Taewon smiled. "Then you're welcome." Minjae looked toward the garden. 1 year. Taewon nodded. 1 year. I still remember bringing her here. She was so small. She barely slept. Taewon laughed. She still doesn't. Minjae laughed too. Then he became quiet. I was terrified. Of what? Everything. He looked at Haneul. Being a father. Being alone. Failing her. Taewon listened. But. Minjae smiled. I wasn't alone for as long as I thought. Taewon looked at him. You weren't. Minjae's eyes softened. You stayed. Taewon nodded. I did. And you kept coming back. I promised. Minjae smiled. You did. The silence returned. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Minjae rested his hands on his knees. He looked at Taewon. There were so many things he wanted to say. Things he still couldn't quite name. He wasn't ready to say love. Not yet. But he knew one thing. He didn't want to imagine Haneul growing up without Taewon somewhere in her life. And he didn't want to imagine his own life without him either. That realization frightened him. But it didn't make him want to run. Haneul suddenly stood. She wobbled. Then took 3 tiny steps toward Taewon. Taewon immediately reached out. Careful. Haneul smiled. She reached him. Taewon caught her. Look at you. Minjae laughed. She's walking to you. Taewon looked at him. She is. Minjae smiled. She really loves you. Taewon held Haneul close. I love her too. Minjae's heart skipped. Taewon looked at him. And you. The words were quiet, almost lost beneath the evening breeze. But Minjae heard them. Neither moved. Taewon's expression became uncertain. Minjae gently smiled. You don't have to explain. Taewon nodded. I just wanted you to know. Minjae looked at Haneul. Then back at him. I know. The night deepened. Eventually, Taewon stood. I should go. Minjae nodded. Tomorrow. Taewon smiled. Tomorrow. He walked toward the gate. Then stopped. He turned around. Minjae. Happy birthday to Haneul. Minjae smiled. Thank you. Taewon looked at him for another moment. Then left. Minjae watched him disappear down the road. He stood there for a long time. Then looked back at the house. The decorations. The toys. The little birthday crown. The empty plates. All the evidence of a day filled with people who loved his daughter. He smiled. Haneul toddled toward him. Pa, I'm here. He picked her up. She rested her head against him. Minjae looked toward the road where Taewon had disappeared. His heart felt strangely full. That night, after putting Haneul to bed, Minjae sat at his desk. He opened his journal. For a long time, he didn't write. Then finally, Haneul is 1 year old. He smiled. Everyone went home. He paused. But somehow, I don't feel alone. Another line. Maybe that's what Taewon has become. He stared at the sentence. Then slowly wrote, someone I don't want to lose. Minjae closed the journal. Outside his window, the village was quiet. The birthday was over. The decorations would eventually come down. The flowers would fade. The children would grow. Haneul would become a little older every day. And somewhere along the way, Minjae knew he would have to stop being afraid of what his heart was trying to tell him. Not tonight, but soon. Chapter 20. Growing Together. The first thing Seo Minjae noticed that morning was the sunlight. It spilled through the curtains and reached the floor in a warm golden line. Outside, birds were already singing. The garden was greener than it had been months ago. The orchard beyond the fence was heavy with fruit. And somewhere downstairs, Pa, Minjae opened his eyes. He smiled. I'm awake. Another excited voice followed. Pa, Minjae sat up. Coming. Haneul was standing in the hallway when he opened the door. Actually standing. Her little hands were stretched toward him for balance. Minjae's eyes widened. Look at you. She smiled proudly. Then took 1 step, 2, 3, straight into his arms. Minjae caught her. You walked. Haneul laughed. You really walked. He lifted her into the air and kissed her cheeks. My baby is growing up. Haneul giggled. Pa, yes. Minjae hugged her tightly. Papa saw. A knock came at the door. Minjae didn't need to ask who it was. Come in. Taewon stepped inside carrying a basket. He stopped when he saw Haneul standing. She walked. Minjae nodded excitedly. By herself. Taewon crouched immediately. Come here. Haneul looked at him, then took a few unsteady steps. Taewon caught her. Good job. Haneul laughed. Minjae watched them. His heart felt strangely full. She really is growing. Taewon smiled. So are you. Minjae blinked. Me. Yes. Breakfast was louder than usual. Haneul refused to sit still. Minjae kept trying to feed her. Taewon kept moving things out of her reach. Eventually, Haneul grabbed a piece of fruit and proudly held it above her head. Minjae sighed. Why? Taewon laughed. She's celebrating. She's making breakfast difficult. Haneul laughed harder. Minjae couldn't help smiling. The house was noisy, messy, warm, alive, and Minjae suddenly realized how much he loved that. After breakfast, they walked through the orchard. The harvest season had begun. Villagers were already gathering fruit. Children ran between the trees. Baskets were being filled. Laughter carried across the fields. Haneul walked between Minjae and Taewon. She was still unsteady. Every few steps, she reached for one of their hands. Minjae held her left hand. Taewon held her right. They walked slowly. Together. Bakya saw them from across the orchard. She smiled. Look at you three. Minjae laughed. She's the one doing all the work. Haneul picked up a fallen leaf. Bakya smiled. Of course. Then she looked at Minjae. You look happy. Minjae paused. He looked at the orchard. At Haneul. At Taewon. Yeah. He smiled. I am. Later that afternoon, Minjae sat beneath the old tree with his notebook. His manuscript was nearly finished. The story he had been writing for months was coming to an end. He stared at the final page. Then looked toward his family. Haneul was sitting in the grass. Taewon was showing her how to pick up fallen leaves. Minjae smiled. He finally understood what the ending needed to be. He began writing. The words came easily. Not because he had planned them, but because he had lived them. He wrote about a man who thought home was a place, then discovered it was something people built together. He wrote about fear, About starting again. About accepting help. About learning that love didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrived quietly. A meal left on the table. A hand reaching out. Someone waiting at the gate. Someone who kept coming back. Someone who stayed. Taewon eventually walked over. Are you almost finished? Minjae nodded. Yes. How does it feel? Strange. Why? I've been writing this story for so long. He looked at the notebook. I don't want it to end. Taewon smiled. Maybe it doesn't. Minjae looked at him. The book ends. Taewon nodded. But the life doesn't. Minjae smiled. That's a very good line. You can use it. I might. Haneul toddled toward them. She held something tightly in her hand. A tiny flower. She offered it to Minjae. For Papa. She nodded. Minjae accepted it carefully. Thank you. Then she picked another. This one went to Taewon. Taewon smiled. Thank you. Haneul looked between them, then reached for both their hands. Minjae and Taewon exchanged a glance. Neither let go. That evening, the village gathered for dinner after the harvest work. Tables were placed outside. Food was shared. Children played beneath the trees. Lanterns glowed as the sky darkened. Minjae sat with Haneul beside him. Taewon sat on her other side. Someone across the table smiled. You three look like a family. Minjae froze. Taewon looked at him. For a moment, neither answered. Then Haneul reached across the table and grabbed both of their hands. Minjae laughed softly. I think. He looked at Taewon. We are. Taewon's eyes softened. Yeah. Later, after everyone had gone home, Minjae stood outside their little house. The garden was quiet. The orchard rustled in the night breeze. Haneul was asleep inside. Taewon stood beside him. You meant what you said. Minjae looked at him. About us being a family. Taewon nodded. Minjae smiled. I did. He took a breath. I'm still scared sometimes. I know. I still don't know what the future looks like. Neither do I. But I know what I want. Taewon waited. Minjae reached for his hand. I want you here. Taewon gently held his hand. Then I'll be here. Minjae smiled. Not because you promised. Not because you feel responsible. But because you want to. Taewon nodded. Because I want to. Minjae's eyes became warm. Good. They stood together beneath the porch light. No grand confession. No elaborate promises. Just two people choosing the same direction. Again. And again. And again. Before bed, Minjae returned to his desk. He looked at the final page of his manuscript. At the bottom, he typed the last sentence. Then he leaned back. The book was finished. He closed the laptop. Beside it was his journal. He opened it. For a moment, he thought about everything that had happened since moving to Haedam-ri. The fear, the loneliness, the sleepless nights, the misunderstandings, Haneul's first steps, her first word, the garden, the library, the trip to Seoul, the birthday, Taewon's promises, his own fears, and all the ordinary days between them. He began to write. I thought growing meant becoming someone stronger. He paused, then continued. But maybe growing means learning that you don't have to do everything alone. Another line. Haneul is growing. I'm growing. And so is the little family we've made. Minjae smiled. Then wrote one final sentence. We're growing together. He closed the journal. When he stepped into Haneul's room, she was sleeping peacefully. Minjae kissed her forehead. Good night, my little one. Then he walked back toward the living room. Taewon was waiting by the door. Ready? Minjae nodded. Yes. They stepped outside together. The night sky was clear. The village was quiet. Behind them stood the little house. The place that had once been nothing more than a new address. Now it held memories, laughter, toys, books, a garden, a child growing up, and two people slowly learning what it meant to stay. Minjae looked at Taewon, then at the warm light shining through the windows. He smiled. He had come to Haedam-ri because he wanted somewhere quiet to raise his daughter. He had expected a new beginning. He hadn't expected to find a home. He hadn't expected to find people who would stand beside him. And he certainly hadn't expected to fall in love. But life had given him something better than the future he had planned. It had given him a life he wanted to keep choosing. Every morning, every ordinary day, every difficult moment, together. End of Volume 2. Thank you for listening to II Fiction Stories. Please like, comment, share and subscribe. See you next time.